In the shadows of our world lie stories that defy explanation, mysteries that chill the spine and linger long after the lights are out. From ancient enigmas buried beneath forgotten ruins to whispers of the unexplained in the dead of night, these are the moments that test our understanding of reality. What hides just beyond our perception? Which secrets have we been too afraid to uncover? Tonight, we journey into the unknown, confronting the eerie, the unexplained, and the unsettling truths that haunt history itself. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into 3 hours of the most terrifying mysteries that will give you chills. Nestled amid the frozen expanse of northern Canada, the land around Anjikuni Lake stretches wide and silent. In winter, snow blankets the sparse forests, softening every sound, every movement, until the world feels suspended in stillness. Timber cabins stand scattered across the tundra, their chimneys idle, doors closed, and windows frosted over. It is here, in December of 1930, that a chilling and enduring mystery began. A small, remote village vanished without a trace, leaving behind only questions and the faint, lingering scent of human habitation. Francis Way, a fur trapper familiar with the harsh rhythms of the north, arrived at Anjikuni village to check on the winter supplies. What he found was startling. The cabins were empty, hearths cold, food and clothing untouched, and personal belongings left as if their owners had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. Dogs lay chained, waiting patiently for their absent masters, and smoke from fires that should have burned for warmth had long since vanished into the frozen air. A village that should have been alive with the quiet murmurs of daily life had become a silent graveyard of absence. Local authorities and neighboring trappers were called in. Investigations revealed no signs of struggle, no tracks in the snow pointing to a mass exodus, no evidence that wolves or other predators had claimed the villagers. Some suggested a tragic outcome of disease or starvation, but records from the time indicate that the village was well stocked for the winter, with provisions sufficient for months. How could an entire community disappear so completely, leaving only untouched belongings and an eerie stillness in their wake? Over time, various explanations emerged. Some researchers proposed that the villagers may have been victims of foul play, perhaps a calculated attack by outsiders. But no bodies, no traces of violence, and no historical records support such a scenario. Others speculated that harsh northern conditions could have forced a sudden relocation, yet there is no evidence of a planned departure, no trails leading into the surrounding wilderness, no clues to indicate a journey undertaken in haste. Fringe theories, as they inevitably do, began to surface. Could the villagers have been taken by unknown forces? Was there an unexplained phenomenon, perhaps even something beyond our current understanding of the natural world, that swept through Anjikuni overnight? While such theories remain speculative, they underscore the profound strangeness of the event. A community disappearing as completely as if the snow itself had swallowed them whole. Newspaper accounts from the time, though sparse, hint at the wider fascination this disappearance inspired. Some reports note that local indigenous elders spoke of spirits and unseen watchers in the northern forests, voices warning travelers of unsettling forces that roamed the area. Anthropologists and historians caution against treating these stories as literal evidence, yet they also acknowledge that folklore often encodes observations of real phenomena, passed down through generations. What makes Anjikuni truly compelling is not only the totality of the disappearance, but the absence of closure. Decades later, researchers retracing the steps of Francis Way and other trappers find only echoes. Abandoned cabins, empty dog sleds, and frozen fields stretching into the horizon. Each clue seems to point not toward explanation, but toward the unknowable. Were the villagers victims of a sudden tragedy, or was there a deliberate orchestration beyond human comprehension? As winter returns to the northern expanse each year, one cannot help but wonder, what secrets lie beneath the frozen earth? Could the truth be buried, waiting for time or circumstance to reveal it? Or does Anjikuni remain, as it has for nearly a century, a silent testament to the mysteries that sometimes evade even our most diligent scrutiny, reminding us that, in some places, the world still holds its breath? As the icy silence of Anjikuni fades from our minds, we shift continents and centuries, tracing another shadow that settled over a land in chaos. In the summer of 1789, the rolling fields and small villages of rural France were bathed in warm sunlight. Yet beneath that serene surface simmered a tension as palpable as any winter frost. The countryside, dotted with stone cottages, tilled fields, and winding dirt roads, seemed tranquil at first glance. But this calm would soon fracture, giving rise to a wave of fear and uncertainty so intense it would ripple across the nation, a phenomenon later known as the Great Fear. In the wake of revolutionary fervor, whispers of rebellion and unrest spread like wildfire through the villages. Farmers and peasants, already burdened by feudal dues, heard rumors of brigands, marauding aristocrats, and secret conspiracies that threatened their homes and families. Panic, once seated, grew quickly in the tightly knit rural communities. People barricaded doors, armed themselves with whatever tools were at hand, and prepared for attacks that may never have come. Entire regions seemed gripped by a collective hysteria, fueled by fear, rumor, and the unknown. Contemporary accounts describe the scene vividly. Men and women moved through the night with torches, carrying pitchforks and scythes, voices hushed yet urgent. Fires flickered across the fields as villagers attempted to signal warnings to neighboring communities. Some historians suggest that the movement of peasants was as much self-protection as it was preemptive defense, a response to the volatile political climate and the breakdown of centralized authority. Yet the precise trigger of the Great Fear remains difficult to pin down. Why did the panic erupt with such intensity in some regions while others remained relatively untouched? Mainstream explanations point to a combination of social, economic, and political pressures. France at the time was struggling with food shortages, harsh taxation, and growing resentment toward the nobility. The revolution, already in motion in urban centers, sent ripples into rural communities that had long felt overlooked and exploited. For many, the rumors of conspiracies and impending attacks may have been plausible, rooted in a lived reality of hardship and injustice. But even acknowledging these tangible pressures does not fully account for the sheer scale and speed of the panic. Accounts also speak of a more elusive element. The fear itself seemed contagious, almost independent of factual events. Villagers who had heard only vague whispers of danger began acting as though a tangible threat had arrived. Some nights, towns were abandoned as peasants fled to forests, hills, or the relative safety of neighboring villages. Stories of phantom armies and invisible assailants circulated, adding layers of uncertainty that no official record could fully explain. Could mass psychology alone account for this sweeping terror? Or was there something subtler, a catalyst lost to history that amplified human anxiety into near hysteria? Fringe perspectives, often overlooked in traditional histories, hint at even stranger possibilities. Some contemporary letters mention shadowy figures and mysterious lights in the night sky, interpreted by villagers as omens or warnings. Others describe hearing unidentifiable sounds, rustlings, distant footsteps, or untraceable drums that set hearts racing and spurred flight. While modern scholars may argue these accounts reflect natural phenomena, misinterpretations, or exaggerations, they nonetheless illustrate the intensity of the perception of threat. In these moments, the line between the real and the imagined became almost irrelevant, as fear itself dictated behavior. The Great Fear also intersected with social revolution in unexpected ways. As villages responded to the rumors and panic, acts of rebellion against local lords increased. Grain stores were looted, documents destroyed, and in some cases, aristocratic estates were attacked or burned. Historians debate whether these actions were opportunistic or genuinely fueled by fear of conspiracy. Were these the calculated moves of desperate communities or spontaneous eruptions of collective anxiety? The blurred boundary between self-preservation and rebellion underscores the mystery at the heart of the Great Fear, an event rooted in reality yet shadowed by uncertainty. Even today, centuries later, questions linger. How much of the Great Fear can be attributed to social pressures, and how much to the intangible force of rumor, imagination, or perhaps the unknowable tendencies of human behavior under stress? Did the villagers glimpse something real in the darkness, forces or actors never documented? Or was it merely the projection of their anxieties onto a tense world? The answers remain elusive. As we leave the fields and cottages of revolutionary France, it is worth reflecting on the nature of fear itself. In both Anjikuni and rural France, communities confronted the unknown, one through disappearance, the other through mass panic. In each case, the ordinary world was fractured, leaving us with fragments of evidence, stories passed down through generations, and a profound sense of incompleteness. What lies behind the whispers, the shadows, and the vanished lives? Perhaps the true mystery is not only in the events themselves, but in the way human consciousness interprets and reacts to the unknown, creating patterns and legends that endure long after the facts have faded. From the tense fields of revolutionary France, we now cross time and geography to the industrial heart of England, to the cobbled streets and narrow alleys of Halifax in the late summer of 1938. The town, known for its woolen mills and bustling markets, was a familiar scene of ordinary life, shopkeepers tending their stalls, children playing in quiet lanes, and factory whistles marking the rhythm of the day. But beneath this veneer of normality, a subtle unease began to grow, one that would grip the community in a sudden and inexplicable terror, the fear of the Halifax slasher. It began quietly. In early August, a woman claimed to have been attacked while walking home after dark, her assailant wielding a knife and striking with precise, deliberate blows. Soon after, similar reports began to surface, men and women describing near-identical encounters, each alleging attacks by a shadowy figure moving silently through the streets. Panic spread faster than the local police could respond. Businesses closed earlier than usual, streets emptied after dusk, and entire neighborhoods were patrolled by anxious residents armed with kitchen knives, garden tools, and anything they could use to defend themselves. Contemporary newspaper accounts provide a vivid sense of the atmosphere. Street corners, once ordinary, became stages for whispered warnings. Windows were barred, lights left on through the night, and the sound of footsteps in alleys prompted suspicion and fear. What is striking is not only the sheer volume of reports, but the striking similarity of the descriptions, despite the absence of any confirmed perpetrator. Did a lone, methodical attacker stalk the town, or was the fear itself contagious and pervasive, shaping perception and memory in ways that blurred reality? Mainstream historians often point to mass hysteria as the primary explanation. Social psychologists argue that fear can propagate like wildfire through tightly knit communities, especially when combined with media coverage and personal anxieties. Rumors, once begun, acquire their own momentum, amplified with each retelling. Yet this explanation, while compelling, does not fully account for the emotional intensity and the speed at which Halifax transformed from a quiet industrial town into a landscape of suspicion and dread. What mechanisms within a community allow panic to take root so completely, convincing individuals of danger even in the absence of solid evidence? Reports of attacks varied widely. Some described the assailant as a man in a dark overcoat, others as someone masked, moving with inhuman swiftness. Victims claimed to have been struck with knives, razor blades, or other sharp implements, but investigations yielded no physical evidence, no traces linking these accounts to a real individual. Police, initially cautious but increasingly desperate, conducted stakeouts, questioned witnesses, and inspected every shadowed corner. Still, no attacker was ever apprehended. Over time, official statements suggested that the phenomenon may have been a case of collective misperception, fueled by fear, rumors, and the heightened tension of a pre-war society. Yet, as with many historical mysteries, fringe theories persisted. Some speculated about the presence of an organized group of pranksters or saboteurs seeking to exploit the town's anxiety. Others hinted at something stranger. Could the Halifax slasher have been a figure of the subconscious, a manifestation of communal fears taking physical form in the minds of those who saw him? While such ideas verge on the speculative, they underscore the profound psychological element at play, revealing how human perception can construct terrifying realities even in the absence of external threats. What makes Halifax particularly compelling is the interplay between fact and perception. Official records eventually indicated that many attacks were likely fabrications or misunderstandings. Some individuals may have misinterpreted minor scrapes, accidental encounters, or even shadows in the night as deliberate assaults. Yet the emotional impact on the town was undeniable. Communities banded together, patrolled their streets, and remained vigilant for weeks on end. The fear was real, even if the threat may have been imagined, illustrating a paradox central to the Halifax slasher mystery. When collective anxiety becomes tangible, the line between the real and the perceived blurs entirely. Contemporary letters, diaries, and newspaper clippings hint at an even more subtle layer of the mystery. Some residents recalled fleeting figures vanishing in alleys, sudden cold chills in empty streets, and a persistent sense of being watched. Could these sensations have been purely psychological, the product of heightened vigilance and fear? Or did they reflect something anomalous, a reminder that our understanding of the world is always filtered through perception and expectation? The Halifax slasher, whether real or imagined, exists in this liminal space between fact and interpretation, where fear itself takes on a life of its own. In the aftermath, Halifax returned to normalcy, yet the legend lingered. Scholars continue to examine police reports and media accounts, piecing together what may have happened. Some see the case as a textbook example of mass hysteria. Others view it as a cautionary tale about the power of rumor and suggestion, and yet, despite decades of study, questions remain. How did so many individuals report similar experiences without a verifiable assailant? Why did fear spread so rapidly in a single, localized community? And what does the Halifax slasher tell us about the human mind's capacity to create and believe in threats that may not exist? As we leave the streets of Halifax behind, we are left with the enduring tension between reality and perception, between the tangible and the imagined. Much like the vanished villagers of Anjikuni and the panicked peasants of revolutionary France, the people of Halifax remind us that mysteries need not involve disappearance or violence to be profound. Sometimes, the very act of fear, the way it spreads, mutates, and shapes our experience of the world, is enough to create a mystery that endures, quietly unsettling, waiting for us to question the boundaries of what we know and what we merely believe. From the anxious streets of Halifax, where fear thrived even in the absence of a tangible threat, we travel back in both time and landscape to the remote, rugged hills of the Gévaudan region in south-central France. Here, the rolling forests, steep valleys, and winding rivers create a landscape both beautiful and unforgiving. In the mid-18th century, this was a land of scattered villages and pastoral fields where life moved slowly, dictated by the rhythms of farming, livestock, and the changing seasons. But between 1764 and 1767, the peace of these isolated communities was shattered by a series of attacks so terrifying that they have endured in legend for centuries, the killings attributed to what became known as the Beasts of Gévaudan. The first reports describe sudden, brutal attacks on men, women, and children alike, often while traveling between villages or tending livestock in the fields. Victims were found mauled, their injuries unusually savage, prompting fear that no ordinary animal could be responsible. Eyewitnesses claimed to have seen a creature unlike any known wolf, larger than a man, with reddish fur, a terrifyingly broad snout, and eyes that seemed to gleam with unnatural intelligence. Night after night, the countryside echoed with panic as parents kept their children close, shepherds guarded their flocks with weapons, and villagers barricaded themselves indoors. Contemporary records provide chilling detail. Parish registers and court documents list the growing number of victims, often describing wounds inconsistent with known predators. Local authorities were overwhelmed. Royal envoys were dispatched from Paris, hunting parties organized, yet the creature, or creatures, continued to elude capture. Some suggested that it might be a wolf or a pack of wolves unusually large and aggressive, yet others noted behaviors inconsistent with wild animals, attacks focused on humans rather than livestock, a seemingly deliberate strategy, and an apparent cunning in avoiding hunters. Mainstream explanations offered by historians typically point to a combination of environmental factors and human perception. Wolves were known to inhabit the forests of France, and packs occasionally turned aggressive when prey was scarce. But even the most aggressive wolves rarely inflicted the sheer scale of human casualties reported over 3 years. Could there have been more than one predator? Some contemporary accounts speak of multiple attacks occurring simultaneously in distant locations, leading some researchers to propose that a coordinated group of animals, perhaps trained or unusually bold, was responsible. Yet no definitive evidence has ever been found to substantiate this theory. Fringe theories, which persist even today, venture further. Some historians and folklorists have speculated that the attacks were the work of an exotic animal, possibly imported or escaped from private menageries, a lion, hyena, or other non-native predator. Others suggest a darker, more human-centered hypothesis, that the attacks were perpetrated by one or more individuals using dogs or disguised as beasts, exploiting local superstitions to cover human crimes. Still, the lack of concrete evidence for these ideas leaves them in the realm of speculation, tantalizing yet unproven. Eyewitness accounts themselves add to the mystery. Survivors often described the creature moving with uncanny speed, leaping across fences and ravines, and exhibiting intelligence that defied natural explanation. Some claimed it seemed almost to stalk its victims, choosing when and where to strike. These descriptions fed a growing aura of terror that extended beyond the immediate victims. Rumors of the beast spread across villages, heightening anxiety and influencing behavior in ways that echo the Halifax slasher and the Great Fear centuries later. Fear, it seems, has a way of magnifying the unknown. The social response was as extraordinary as the attacks themselves. Militias were formed, bounties announced, and hunters from across France, including noted marksmen and soldiers, were brought in to track and kill the beast. Occasionally, a wolf or a large dog was captured and presented as the culprit, but attacks continued, suggesting either multiple perpetrators or that the original threat remained at large. Church sermons and local folklore began to intertwine with the events. framing the beast as a punishment or omen, adding a moral and mystical layer to the already terrifying phenomenon. What is particularly compelling about the beasts of Gévaudan is the interplay of documented fact and enduring uncertainty. Parish records, official correspondence, and contemporary accounts provide a detailed timeline, yet they leave critical questions unanswered. How could a single predator, or even a pack, inflict so many casualties without being captured? Why did it seem to target humans specifically? And perhaps most haunting of all, what was it that villagers saw in the forests and fields, lurking at the edge of perception, that left them so profoundly shaken? As we reflect on these events, it is striking how fear itself shaped the experience. Villagers armed themselves, hunters pursued tracks, and the countryside buzzed with speculation and rumor. Yet no matter the explanations offered, no matter the number of hunts or captured animals, the core mystery endures. The beasts of Gévaudan remain a haunting reminder that the line between the natural and the unknown can blur in unsettling ways, leaving communities, and history itself, with questions that refuse to be answered. The remote hills and dense forests of Gévaudan, where these events unfolded, still carry an echo of that time. Even centuries later, visitors describe a sense of quiet unease, a lingering awareness that something once prowled these lands with deadly intent. What exactly terrorized these communities, and why was it never fully apprehended? Was it nature at its most feral, a human hand cloaked in darkness, or something entirely beyond comprehension? Like Halifax, like Anjikuni, the region reminds us that some mysteries do not simply fade with time, they persist, quietly demanding that we reconsider what we think we know about the world around us. From the shadowed forests of Gévaudan, where fear stalked the hills in the form of beasts unknown, we return to England, to the rugged moorlands and pastoral valleys of Devon in the year 1855. Here, the countryside stretches in rolling hills dotted with stone cottages, hedgerows, and winding paths that twist through fields heavy with heather and grass. Life in Devon at the time was quiet and steady, governed by the rhythms of farming, livestock, and the occasional market day. Yet, beneath this veneer of ordinary rural life, an event occurred that would confound locals and visitors alike. An occurrence so strange, so seemingly supernatural, that it came to be known as the Devil's Hoofmarks. It began one morning in the village of Buckfastleigh, when farm workers discovered a series of deep, hoof-like impressions etched into the soft earth of a hillside. Each print was unusually large, far exceeding the size of any domestic or wild animal known to inhabit the region. They were perfectly shaped, with a distinct three-pronged form, appearing in a straight line as if some massive, heavy creature had walked deliberately across the field. Farmers initially assumed it was the work of cattle or a large horse, but the scale and spacing of the marks did not correspond to any familiar animal. Soon, similar impressions were reported on other hillsides, crossing farms, roads, and even grazing lands in a path that seemed to ignore natural obstacles. Eyewitness accounts, recorded in local newspapers and parish diaries, describe both fascination and dread. Some villagers claimed that the marks appeared overnight, with no tracks leading to or from them, an unsettling sign that whatever had made them had seemingly vanished into thin air. Others noted an eerie stillness in the air where the prints were found, a silence broken only by the occasional gust of wind through the heather. There was a sense among the community that these were not ordinary signs of animal movement, but something deliberate, something that carried intent and perhaps even intelligence. Mainstream explanations of the time were cautious but naturalistic. Some suggested that the marks were the result of unusual hooves from an exotic animal, perhaps brought into the region for a traveling menagerie or circus. Others argued that natural phenomena, such as erosion or landslides, might have created impressions in the soil resembling hooves. Yet skeptics struggled to account for the remarkable precision of the prints, the large scale, and the apparent randomness of their placement. Unlike typical tracks, these marks appeared in areas difficult to access, often crossing fences, streams, and cultivated fields with no evidence of the creature itself. Local folklore quickly added a darker dimension to the mystery. Villagers whispered that the marks were the work of the devil himself, walking the hills in the dead of night. Tales circulated that livestock became restless near the impressions, that shadows moved strangely among the trees, and that those who lingered too long near the hoofmarks felt an inexplicable chill. While such interpretations were rooted in superstition, they also reflected a profound human response to an unexplained phenomenon, the need to give shape and meaning to what defies understanding. Fringe theories, though less documented, have persisted over time. Some modern researchers speculate that the marks could have been the work of a large, unrecorded species, now extinct or displaced from the region. Others suggest a human hand, perhaps a prankster, an artist, or a ritualistic individual, capable of crafting the prints with tools designed to mimic hooves. Still, none of these explanations fully account for the widespread nature of the marks or their precise replication across diverse terrain. Could it be that the impressions were more than mere physical depressions in the earth, that they were instead a manifestation of fear, imagination, or collective perception? The devil's hoofmarks also raise questions about the relationship between observation and belief. Villagers, already attuned to the rhythms of the land and the seasonal movements of livestock, were suddenly confronted with signs that did not conform to any known animal or natural process. In a rural, isolated community, where daily life depended on a close reading of the landscape, the presence of something so alien was profoundly disorienting. People adapted by avoiding the hills, treating the impressions with caution, and passing down the story as both warning and mystery. The physical marks may have faded, but the psychological impact lingered. What remains most compelling about the devil's hoofmarks is the uncertainty surrounding them. Unlike documented attacks or disappearances, there was no victim, no direct confrontation, only evidence of movement, signs of a presence both deliberate and inexplicable. The marks persist in historical records as both curiosity and enigma, prompting speculation across centuries. Were they the footprints of an unknown animal, a human trick, or something beyond explanation entirely? Could natural processes alone account for the precision and scale, or was there an intelligence behind them, as villagers long believed? As we reflect on the hills of Devon, the parallels with previous mysteries become apparent. Like the beasts of Gévaudan, the Halifax slasher, and even Anjikuni, the devil's hoofmarks remind us that human perception is shaped not only by what we see, but by what we fear, expect, and cannot explain. The footprints remain a silent testimony to a moment when the ordinary world was interrupted by something extraordinary, leaving only questions, wonder, and unease. Even today, visitors to the Devon moorlands describe a peculiar sensation when walking in areas where the impressions were recorded, an awareness of history, mystery, and perhaps the unknown. What walked these hills in 1855? Was it simply an elaborate trick, an extraordinary natural occurrence, or something that lies beyond conventional understanding? Like so many of the mysteries we have explored, the answer eludes us, leaving us to ponder the lingering presence of the unexplained in a world that often feels entirely familiar. From the rolling moors of Devon, where strange impressions in the earth inspired tales of the devil himself, we now cross the Atlantic to the vast, sun-baked plains of eastern Texas. Here, in the 1980s, the small town of Black Hope seemed like any other rural American community. Quiet streets, sprawling farms, and the occasional oil rig standing as a reminder of the region's industrious past. Life moved at a steady pace, dictated by the rhythms of the land and the cycles of local industry. But beneath this unassuming surface, something began to disturb the very fabric of the town, a series of events that would become known as the Black Hope Curse. The disturbances began subtly. Families reported strange sounds at night, footsteps echoing through empty hallways, doors opening and closing on their own, and a low, almost whispered murmur that seemed to drift through the darkness. Livestock behaved erratically, often found trembling in pens or refusing to eat, and electrical appliances malfunctioned without explanation. At first, residents dismissed these occurrences as ordinary mechanical failures or the tricks of an overactive imagination. Yet as reports multiplied, a pattern became unmistakable. The disturbances followed specific locations and families, suggesting an unseen presence, a force operating beyond the bounds of explanation. Local newspapers documented the growing unease. One report describes a family waking to find deep scratches across bedroom walls, the marks too high for any child or pet to reach. Another recounts the sudden illness of livestock on a farm where no natural cause could be identified. Over time, entire households reported feeling an oppressive presence, a sense of being watched, followed, or even subtly restrained by something unseen. The town, once tight-knit and orderly, found itself gripped by uncertainty, as neighbors questioned whether the occurrences were natural anomalies or evidence of something far more sinister. Mainstream explanations focused on psychological and environmental factors. Skeptics suggested that stress, economic pressures, and heightened awareness of local folklore could create the perception of haunting. Electrical issues, animal behavior, and sleep disturbances might have been amplified by human expectation, turning coincidence into compelling narrative. Yet even among skeptics, the consistency of the reports over different families, locations, and years challenged simple explanations. Why did the disturbances often appear in patterns, moving methodically from house to house, farm to farm, as if guided by intention? Folklore and local legend quickly intertwined with contemporary events. The land surrounding Black Hope has a long history, stretching back centuries, and some locals spoke of prior misfortunes, unexplained deaths, disappearances, and tragedies that seemed to cluster near particular parcels of land. Stories of curses or malevolent spirits had long circulated, often dismissed by modern townsfolk, but the intensity of the 1980s disturbances revived these old narratives. Could there be a connection, a continuity of energy or influence from past events? Or were the patterns of fear and tragedy coincidental, interpreted after the fact through the lens of communal memory and superstition? Fringe theories, circulating in small circles at the time, proposed even stranger possibilities. Some suggested that Black Hope had been built over a site of ritual significance, perhaps connected to centuries-old occult practices, leaving residual energies that manifested as the disturbances. Others speculated that the town itself had become a focus for unknown forces, a place where natural and supernatural intersected in ways imperceptible to casual observation. While these ideas remain unverified, they underscore the central mystery: an ordinary town, subjected to extraordinary events, leaving its inhabitants, and us, wondering about the limits of reality. Eyewitness accounts provide the most compelling glimpse into the phenomena. Residents described seeing shadowy figures at the edges of vision, hearing footsteps in empty hallways, and feeling sudden cold drafts in closed rooms. Some even reported objects moving independently, doors swinging open with a force too strong to be accidental. These experiences, shared by multiple families across different locations, created a sense of continuity and pattern that defied conventional explanation. Could these events have been hallucinations, amplified by anxiety and local lore? Or did they point to a presence, conscious and deliberate, that remained invisible yet undeniably real to those affected? The Black Hope curse also raises broader questions about human perception and the nature of fear. In rural communities, where isolation magnifies both natural and psychological phenomena, small anomalies can quickly take on outsized significance. The townspeople of Black Hope were faced not just with unusual events, but with the social consequences of shared belief, mistrust, caution, and the subtle reshaping of daily life. In such an environment, ordinary occurrences can take on the weight of the extraordinary, leaving a community collectively on edge. Even decades later, the Black Hope disturbances continue to intrigue researchers, paranormal investigators, and folklorists. Physical evidence is sparse, but the accounts remain, carefully documented in newspapers, personal diaries, and interviews. Each new retelling adds nuance, yet the core questions endure. What exactly occurred in Black Hope? Was it a series of natural phenomena misinterpreted by anxious observers, a deliberate hoax, or something beyond current understanding entirely? And perhaps most unsettling, could such disturbances recur elsewhere, in places we consider ordinary and familiar, reminding us of the thin boundary between the known and the unknowable? As we leave the quiet streets and sprawling fields of Black Hope behind, it is impossible not to reflect on the continuity of mystery. Like the Hoofmarks in Devon, the beasts of Gévaudan, and the Halifax panic, the disturbances reveal a recurring pattern. Ordinary communities confronted with inexplicable events that defy understanding, leaving only questions, fear, and the enduring sense of the uncanny. What still lingers in the shadows of Black Hope, beyond the reach of human observation? And what does it tell us about the world we inhabit, where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexist just out of sight, waiting to be noticed? From the isolated plains of Black Hope, where inexplicable disturbances unsettled entire families and blurred the line between the natural and the supernatural, we return once more to England, this time to the suburban streets of Enfield in North London. It is 1977, a year that would see a quiet council house in a modest neighborhood transform into the focal point of one of the most documented and enduring cases of alleged poltergeist activity in modern history. Here, ordinary life, school routines, local shops, and children playing in the streets would collide with events so strange that they challenged both skepticism and belief. The story begins at 284 Green Street, a typical brick-built council house, home to Peggy Hodgson and her 4 children. At first, the disturbances were subtle. Furniture creaked and shifted, strange knocking sounds echoed through the empty rooms, and small objects seemed to move of their own accord. But the subtlety soon gave way to phenomena that could no longer be ignored. Heavy chairs toppled without explanation. Toys flew across rooms, and knocking and scratching noises intensified, often concentrating in the children's bedrooms. The household, previously a quiet and orderly place, became a site of escalating fear and confusion. Contemporary reports detail a growing pattern of activity focused particularly on the 2 youngest Hodgson children, Janet and Johnny. Neighbors reported hearing inexplicable thuds and bangs, sometimes in the middle of the night, that rattled walls and floors. Investigators from local authorities and paranormal societies arrived, attempting to document the events scientifically. Photographs captured furniture seemingly moved without human intervention, and audio recordings captured strange knocks and voices that some claimed did not originate from any person in the room. These accounts were recorded meticulously by the Society for Psychical Research, whose members noted the consistency of the phenomena over several weeks. Mainstream explanations have ranged from psychological factors to fabrication. Skeptics argue that at least some of the activity could have been staged by the children, noting that adolescents are capable of trickery, particularly under attention or stress. Yet, investigators frequently highlighted moments when multiple phenomena occurred simultaneously in different locations, making it highly improbable that human agency alone could account for every incident. Could the fear, anticipation, and social dynamics within the household have amplified natural creaks and settling noises into experiences perceived as malevolent? Or was something genuinely anomalous at work, defying conventional explanation? Eyewitness accounts provide some of the most compelling and puzzling evidence. Janet Hodgson, then 11 years old, appeared to exhibit convulsive movements and changes in voice tone during episodes that some interpreted as direct manifestations of the entity. Witnesses described an unseen force manipulating objects with strength beyond normal human capability, sometimes throwing heavy furniture across rooms, leaving dents and marks in walls. Investigators also noted spontaneous occurrences of knocks and raps that seemed to respond to questions posed aloud, a phenomenon commonly referred to as intelligent poltergeist activity. If these events were entirely orchestrated, how could such timing, coordination, and consistency be explained across multiple observers and sessions? The Enfield case also attracted media attention, creating a feedback loop that heightened both public interest and the stress on the household. Newspapers and television crews arrived to document the activity, further complicating investigators' efforts to discern the genuine from the staged. Yet even with cameras and scientific apparatus present, numerous occurrences continued, defying the conventional limitations of perception and control. The phenomenon seemed to have a life of its own, selectively interacting with the environment and its occupants in ways that both frightened and fascinated. Fringe theories flourished alongside documented investigations. Some proposed that the disturbances were caused by an external spirit or poltergeist, a manifestation of unseen consciousness. Others speculated about psychokinetic energy, suggesting that intense emotional states, particularly in children, might unconsciously influence objects in the surrounding environment. While these theories remain speculative, they point to an enduring question. Can the human mind interface with the physical world in ways science does not yet understand? Or were these events a unique confluence of human behavior, perception, and circumstance? An additional layer of mystery surrounds the entity's apparent intent. The poltergeist seemed selective, interacting primarily with Janet, sometimes exhibiting mischief, other times violence, and occasionally communicating through knocks or disembodied speech. Investigators noted patterns in behavior, as if the entity was aware of observation and adapted its actions accordingly. Could this indicate consciousness behind the phenomena, or was it merely the reflection of complex psychological and environmental influences amplified by social attention? These questions remain central to understanding the case, underscoring why it continues to captivate researchers and the public alike. The Enfield poltergeist, while specific in its time and location, illustrates a recurring theme in unexplained phenomena: the intersection of human perception, environment, and something that resists easy categorization. In Black Hope, people interpreted disturbances through fear and folklore. In Devon, impressions in the earth became symbols of the unknown. In Enfield, an urban household confronted activity that was both tangible and ephemeral, ordinary and extraordinary. The tension between documented evidence and subjective experience creates a space in which mystery persists, where the mind seeks to rationalize, yet the phenomena themselves remain frustratingly elusive. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of the Enfield case is its lingering ambiguity. Despite extensive documentation, photographs, audio recordings, and hours of eyewitness testimony, no definitive explanation has been universally accepted. Was it a case of extraordinary psychokinetic activity? A series of pranks escalated beyond control? Or did something truly anomalous enter the lives of the Hodgson family, leaving behind a trail of unexplained phenomena? Each answer carries its own implications for our understanding of reality, perception, and the limits of observation. As we reflect on the events at 284 Green Street, the parallels with previous mysteries in our journey become apparent. Across continents and centuries, from Anjikuni to Halifax, Gévaudan to Devon, Black Hope to Enfield, ordinary communities confront extraordinary occurrences that resist explanation. In each case, ordinary life is punctured by the unknown, leaving fear, fascination, and uncertainty in its wake. The Enfield Poltergeist reminds us that the world around us may contain layers of experience beyond immediate perception, challenging assumptions and inviting us to question the boundaries between the natural, the psychological, and the inexplicable. Even today, visitors and researchers returning to Enfield speak of a quiet tension lingering in the house, a sense that the extraordinary may leave subtle traces long after events have passed. What remains in that space, unseen yet persistent, continues to intrigue, confound, and provoke wonder. How much of what occurred in 1977 can we explain through reason, and how much continues to defy understanding? And perhaps most unsettling of all, are there forces or phenomena at work in the world that we have yet to recognize, capable of touching ordinary life in profoundly unsettling ways? From the quiet suburban streets of Enfield, where unseen forces seemingly toyed with objects and human perception alike, we travel once again across time and space, this time to the young and restless towns of early 19th century America. The landscape is one of wide, open plains dotted with small settlements, rugged forests, and burgeoning communities still finding their rhythm after the nation's independence. It is the 1800s, a time of rapid change and limited medical understanding, when superstition often intertwined with daily life, and strange phenomena could ignite fear that spread like wildfire. One such incident would come to be remembered as the Madstone Epidemic Panic. The events began in New England, in a small town whose exact location is obscured in historical records, though newspaper accounts and personal letters provide vivid detail. A strange object, a mad stone, as it came to be called, was discovered by local residents. These stones were described as smooth, dark, and heavy, with a mysterious, almost metallic sheen. According to folklore, the stone was believed to have healing properties, capable of curing illnesses such as rabies, infections, or even madness itself. Residents would hold, rinse, or place the stone against afflicted areas, convinced that its touch could draw out disease. For a time, the stone inspired hope. Yet, within weeks, the very object thought to bring relief became a source of terror, sparking what newspapers of the time termed a panic epidemic. Reports describe growing anxiety and suspicion surrounding the stone. Some residents claimed that those who had handled it without ritual or caution fell ill, while others experienced inexplicable agitation, trembling, or bouts of uncontrollable emotion. Entire families reportedly became obsessed with acquiring or avoiding the stone, and disputes arose over its ownership and use. Word of the stone's supposed powers or dangers spread rapidly, moving from town to town, igniting fear and curiosity in equal measure. Ordinary objects became infused with extraordinary significance, and the town's sense of security began to unravel. Mainstream accounts suggest a combination of social contagion and psychological factors. In a community with limited medical knowledge, fear of illness was already acute, and a tangible object, linked by rumor to both cure and malady, could amplify these anxieties. Psychologists today would note the effects of suggestion, collective belief, and heightened attention on symptom perception. Yet historical accounts record instances that defy simple rationalization. People reportedly fainting in the presence of the stone, livestock behaving erratically after contact with it, and objects moving mysteriously near locations where the stone had been placed. Could fear alone, magnified by social dynamics, account for such phenomena? Or was there a deeper, unexplained element at play? Eyewitness testimony offers haunting insight. One letter from a local physician recounts patients arriving with extreme agitation, claiming the stone had pulled at their very blood, and that they could feel an invisible force emanating from it. Another account describes children refusing to enter houses where the stone was kept, shivering and pointing toward its resting place with terror. Scholars of folklore have noted that the mad stone phenomenon reflects a common pattern. A single, unusual object becomes a focal point for fear, belief, and social hysteria, magnifying ordinary anxieties into communal crises. But in this case, the reported intensity and physical reactions to the stone remain perplexing, leaving historians and skeptics alike questioning how an inanimate object could provoke such visceral response. The mad stone panic also highlights the interplay between knowledge, superstition, and social trust in early American communities. Residents depended on local healers, folk remedies, and communal wisdom, yet the stone challenged both expertise and common sense. Some healers condemned it, warning of danger and deceit, while others embraced its reputed powers, further complicating the narrative. As panic spread, ordinary interactions, visits to neighbors, trips to the marketplace, even tending to animals, were reshaped by the fear and fascination surrounding the stone. The boundary between rational caution and irrational dread became increasingly difficult to discern. Fringe interpretations persist alongside historical documentation. Some speculate that the stone may have been naturally radioactive, contaminated, or otherwise chemically unusual, producing subtle effects on mood or physiology. Others suggest that the panic was fueled entirely by psychosocial mechanisms, an early example of mass hysteria amplified by tangible material evidence. There is also the possibility that the legend of the stone's powers was retroactively embellished, with stories growing in intensity as they were shared across communities and newspapers. Each theory, however, leaves gaps and unanswered questions, preserving the enigmatic aura of the events. The epidemic's most puzzling aspect is the way fear spread, seemingly independent of direct contact with the object. Towns far from the original discovery reported heightened anxiety, reports of illness, and even local conflicts tied to the stone's presence or absence. Could the phenomenon have been contagious in a psychological sense, with suggestion and rumor acting as the medium? And yet, for those who interacted directly with the stone, the reactions were often immediate and intense, as if the object itself carried an unseen force capable of influencing the body and mind. Such accounts blur the line between the psychosomatic and the inexplicable. Even today, historians, folklorists, and paranormal researchers look back at the mad stone epidemic with a mixture of fascination and uncertainty. Surviving letters, diaries, and newspaper clippings provide rich detail, yet they cannot fully account for the physical and emotional reactions documented at the time. Was the stone a naturally occurring object imbued with unusual properties? A focal point for mass psychological contagion? Or something beyond conventional understanding entirely? Like the disturbances at Black Hope, the Enfield Poltergeist, or the Devil's Hoofmarks in Devon, the stone represents a moment when ordinary life intersected with extraordinary events, leaving communities shaken and questions unresolved. The mad stone panic also speaks to a broader human pattern, the power of objects and symbols to provoke belief, fear, and behavior beyond rational expectation. From Devon to Enfield, from Texas to New England, humans encounter events or phenomena that cannot be easily explained, and the mind responds by creating meaning, often through fear or fascination. The stone, silent and immobile, became an agent of both hope and terror, a mirror reflecting the anxieties of its time and place. As we reflect on the events of the 1800s, it is impossible to ignore the broader implications. Could similar phenomena occur today, in ways we dismiss as coincidence or mass psychology? How much of what we perceive as ordinary reality is shaped by belief, expectation, and the social amplification of fear? The Mad Stone, though long lost to history, leaves behind an enduring mystery, a reminder that even a simple object can carry extraordinary significance, capable of unsettling entire communities and leaving us to wonder what forces, known or unknown, are still waiting to be noticed. From the quiet towns of early America, where a mysterious stone sent communities into a state of fear and fascination, we now return across the Atlantic to the fog-laden streets of London in the late 18th century. The year is 1788, and the city is alive with commerce, social upheaval, and the murmurs of political unrest. Gas lamps flicker along narrow streets, horse-drawn carriages rattle over cobblestones, and the air carries the mingled scents of the Thames, markets, and the ever-present smoke of industry. Yet amidst this ordinary urban bustle, a shadow would emerge, a figure so elusive, so terrifying, that it would terrorize the women of London for 2 long years. The phenomenon began with individual incidents that might have seemed isolated at first. Women walking alone at night reported being accosted by a man of grotesque appearance, often described as unusually tall, wearing a mask or concealing his features, and wielding a sharp instrument. Accounts vary, but nearly all describe assaults that were frighteningly intimate, focusing on specific clothing or body parts, leaving marks or scratches that could not be easily explained. The initial victims were hesitant to speak publicly, yet as stories multiplied, the city became gripped by fear. By 1789, newspapers and pamphlets chronicled the growing panic. Reports flooded in from Covent Garden, St. James, and the poorer neighborhoods surrounding the city's bustling markets. Women were advised not to walk alone after dark. Community watch groups formed, and local authorities found themselves under unprecedented pressure to apprehend a criminal who seemed both cunning and impossible to track. What made the London monster so terrifying was not just the physical assaults themselves, but the uncertainty. No one knew when or where the next attack would occur, and descriptions of the assailant were inconsistent, adding to the pervasive sense of dread. Mainstream historical explanations focus on the possibility of one or more individuals preying on the city's women for personal gratification, perhaps exploiting the city's dense population and chaotic streets. Contemporary observers speculated about a single genius of crime, a shadow moving swiftly and silently across the urban landscape. Yet, even skeptics are forced to acknowledge the extraordinary pattern of the attacks. The monster seemed to vanish after each assault, leaving no trace or tangible evidence, and witnesses often disagreed on details, height, clothing, voice, making it difficult to create a coherent profile. How could one person strike with such precision, elude capture repeatedly, and instill such widespread terror without leaving behind forensic clues, as rudimentary as they were at the time? Eyewitness accounts deepen the mystery. One woman described feeling an unseen hand grab at her skirts while walking past the dimly lit archways of a side street. Another claimed the assailant leapt from shadows with supernatural agility, leaving bruises and torn clothing as he disappeared. Some witnesses even reported hearing strange, distorted laughter, a detail repeated in multiple accounts. These experiences created a psychological effect that rippled through the city, magnifying fear even among those who had not directly encountered the monster. The urban environment itself, narrow alleys, dark passageways, and the constant murmur of crowds, became a conduit for panic, shaping perception and amplifying the threat. Fringe theories have persisted over centuries, blending historical record with speculation. Some historians suggest the monster may have been a group rather than a single individual, explaining the spread of incidents across distant neighborhoods. Others propose that the attacks were exaggerated or misreported, with fear itself distorting witness recollection and creating the impression of a single malevolent figure. A few more speculative interpretations consider the monster almost as a symbolic figure, a manifestation of societal anxieties about women, crime, and the rapidly changing urban environment of London. Could the monster have existed both as a physical predator and as a psychological echo of the city's deepest fears? The social and cultural response to the London monster is as significant as the attacks themselves. The phenomenon inspired pamphlets, sermons, and public debates about morality, women's safety, and urban vigilance. Police methods were rudimentary, yet the authorities took the panic seriously, patrolling streets and interviewing victims with urgency. Communities developed new strategies for safety. Women walked in groups, men volunteered as escorts, and strangers were scrutinized with suspicion. In effect, the monster shaped the daily life of London, influencing behavior and social norms far beyond the immediate incidents. What remains most enigmatic about the London monster is the combination of fact, rumor, and psychological amplification. Contemporary records, newspapers, diaries, court documents provide a detailed timeline of attacks and public reaction, yet no definitive identification was ever made. Some attacks may have been genuine assaults, while others were likely misperceptions, exaggerations, or even hoaxes. How can historians separate the tangible from the imagined? And, more importantly, how much did the collective fear of the city create a feedback loop, reinforcing the idea of a single omnipresent monster when the reality may have been far less coherent? The case of the London monster also raises broader questions about human response to urban fear. Dense populations, poor lighting, and social inequality create conditions in which small, unexplained events can be magnified into collective panic. The monster's presence, whether real or partially imagined, forced the city to confront vulnerabilities in a way that reshaped public consciousness. Its legacy endures not just in the records of attacks, but in literature, folklore, and the study of early criminology, illustrating how the unknown can dominate perception and memory long after physical evidence has disappeared. Even today, historians and criminologists revisit the London monster with a mix of fascination and uncertainty. The identity of the assailant, or assailants, remains unresolved. Were the attacks perpetrated by a single individual with unusual cunning and strength? A small group working in concert? Or were they a series of unrelated incidents, later linked together by fear and public imagination? The ambiguity leaves an unsettling impression that even in a city as mapped and chronicled as 18th century London, mysteries can persist, hiding in shadows, shaping behavior, and evading definitive explanation. As we reflect on the terror that gripped the streets of London, the parallels with other unexplained events in our exploration become evident. From the mysterious stones in early America to the haunting disturbances in Black Hope, the Poltergeist in Enfield, and the Hoofmarks in Devon, we see a recurring pattern. Ordinary communities, confronted with extraordinary and unsettling phenomena, are forced to navigate fear, uncertainty, and the limits of their understanding. The London monster, with its blend of the physical and psychological, reminds us that mysteries often transcend the boundaries of reason, leaving us to ask, how many shadows in our world are more than they appear, and how many fears are rooted in truths that remain just beyond perception? From the gaslit streets of London, haunted by a mysterious assailant whose identity and motives remained elusive, we move forward several decades into a city still navigating the shadows of the unknown. The year is the early 1830s, and London is a metropolis in flux. Industrial chimneys spew smoke into the overcast sky, cobblestones glisten after rain, and fog drifts along the Thames like a living entity. It is in this dense urban labyrinth, amidst narrow alleyways, silent courtyards, and poorly lit thoroughfares, that a new terror would emerge, one so uncanny and inexplicable that it would haunt the imagination of Londoners and visitors alike for decades. This phenomenon became known as the spring-heeled Jack. The earliest reports describe encounters that defy ordinary explanation. Women and men walking alone at night claim to have seen a figure leap over walls, fences, and rooftops with impossible agility, moving in ways no human could replicate. Witnesses often describe the entity as wearing a tight-fitting suit, sometimes black or metallic in appearance, with eyes that glowed in the darkness and hands tipped with sharp claws. A sense of malevolence accompanied these sightings, a feeling of being deliberately watched, pursued, or threatened. The first accounts, though sporadic, quickly captured public attention, appearing in newspapers and pamphlets that painted the city as a place where reason and reality could be suspended. The terror escalated with the frequency and severity of encounters. Victims reported being physically assaulted, scratches, burns, and even small wounds left behind by a force that vanished as suddenly as it appeared. Others spoke of being chased through streets or across rooftops by a figure whose movements seemed superhuman. What made these experiences especially unsettling was the combination of physicality and elusiveness. Unlike the London monster, whose attacks were violent yet grounded in human limitations, spring-heeled Jack seemed to operate beyond natural boundaries, leaving no trail or evidence beyond frightened witnesses and anecdotal accounts. Contemporary explanations ranged from criminal mischief to mass hysteria. Some theorists suggested that a single man, or perhaps a small group, had mastered acrobatics and theatrical trickery, using masks, mirrors, and hidden apparatus to terrify pedestrians and maintain anonymity. Skeptics pointed to the urban environment itself. Poorly lit streets, exaggerated fear, and the tendency of the human mind to interpret shadows and sound as threats could account for many encounters. Yet eyewitness accounts frequently report consistent features: the leaping, the glowing eyes, the clawed hands, that defy simple rationalization. Could so many people, across different neighborhoods and years, be deceived or misled in exactly the same way? The social impact of spring-heeled Jack was profound. Newspapers chronicled each new encounter with sensational headlines, capturing the public imagination and spreading fear far beyond the immediate location of the attacks. Families altered their routines, avoiding certain streets after dark. Local constables increased patrols, though often arriving too late to witness anything firsthand. The legend transcended actual sightings, influencing theater productions, novels, and folklore, transforming spring-heeled Jack into both a real and symbolic figure, a manifestation of urban anxiety, fear of the unknown, and the fragile boundary between safety and danger in rapidly growing cities. Eyewitness testimonies provide some of the most compelling and eerie details. One young woman described feeling herself lifted into the air by invisible hands before being dropped unharmed, while another recalled a figure springing across the street and disappearing behind a rooftop in a single bound. These events often coincided with moments of darkness, rain, or fog, suggesting a combination of environmental factors and human perception. But no physical evidence, prints, fibers, or traces of the alleged assailant was ever recovered. The phenomenon remained ephemeral yet tangible, a ghostly presence experienced fully in the moment and gone the next. Fringe theories have circulated for centuries, seeking to explain the impossible feats attributed to spring-heeled Jack. Some suggest he was an experimental figure, perhaps a nobleman or eccentric, who used advanced mechanical devices or prosthetics to perform acrobatic stunts. Others speculate that the entity was entirely supernatural, a preternatural being feeding on fear, whose appearances were intermittent and selective. More psychological interpretations propose that the encounters were a form of collective hysteria, amplified by newspapers and social storytelling, in which the mind both anticipates and creates the phenomena it fears. Each theory leaves tantalizing gaps, preserving the mystery and allowing spring-heeled Jack to remain a figure of enduring fascination. The phenomenon also reflects the cultural and social anxieties of the time. Victorian London was a city of extremes. Wealth and poverty, industry and filth, progress and superstition existed side by side. In such an environment, extraordinary events could magnify everyday fears of crime, the unknown, or moral decay into legends that both terrify and enthrall. Spring-heeled Jack, with his impossible leaps and sinister presence, became a mirror of those anxieties, allowing urban society to externalize fear, yet offering no resolution. The phenomenon persisted over decades, adapting to new urban landscapes and continuing to inspire awe, suspicion, and dread. Even today, historians, folklorists, and enthusiasts debate the reality of spring-heeled Jack. Was he a man with extraordinary skill, a social prankster exploiting the vulnerabilities of the city? Or was he something beyond human comprehension, a shadowy figure whose origins and motives remain lost to history? Despite centuries of scrutiny, the mystery persists, challenging conventional explanations and inviting reflection on the interplay of fear, perception, and environment. The terror of spring-heeled Jack also demonstrates how urban myths and unexplained events shape collective consciousness. Like the London monster before him and the Mad Stone Panic or the Enfield Poltergeist, this phenomenon reminds us that human experience is as much shaped by imagination, anticipation, and social dynamics as by physical reality. Ordinary people, moving through familiar streets, suddenly confront events that defy expectation, leaving impressions, physical, psychological, and cultural, that endure long after the last sighting. As we trace the leaps, the glowing eyes, and the shadowy presence through decades of London history, we are left with profound questions. How much of spring-heeled Jack was real, and how much a reflection of collective fear? Could someone, or something, truly move with the agility and intent described in countless accounts? And more broadly, how many mysteries in our world go unnoticed, waiting to manifest in ways that challenge perception and understanding? In the end, spring-heeled Jack lingers not just in the annals of history, but in our imagination, a reminder that the boundary between the known and the unknown is far thinner than we often believe. From the fog-draped streets and shadowed rooftops of London, where the elusive spring-heeled Jack leapt into legend, we turn now to the misty highlands of Scotland, where the story of Ballechin House unfolds, a tale of fear, the unexplained, and a house whose walls seemed alive with restless energy. Nestled amidst rolling hills, dense woodlands, and the winding courses of small streams, Ballechin House was an imposing estate of stone and timber, its structure echoing the austere elegance of 19th-century Scottish architecture. The house, surrounded by forests that swallowed the horizon, was both secluded and magnificent, a perfect setting for events that would unsettle the mind and defy easy explanation. Reports of unusual occurrences began in the early 1870s, shortly after a new family took residence in the house. At first, they were subtle. Faint footsteps in empty corridors, objects slightly displaced, and a cold draft where no window or door could account for it. Yet the disturbances soon escalated. Chairs were reported moved across rooms, tables tipped without cause, and heavy trunks, once stationary, appeared mysteriously in different locations. Servants whispered of noises echoing through the halls at odd hours, and children claimed to see fleeting shadows at the periphery of their vision. The activity, consistent and persistent, suggested intelligence, as though the house itself, or something within it, was aware of the inhabitants' movements. Eyewitness testimony provides some of the most compelling insights into the Ballechin phenomena. Multiple independent witnesses described objects being hurled across rooms, often striking walls or floors with precision, yet leaving no clear explanation for the force involved. Doors slammed shut without wind or interference, windows rattled despite calm weather, and some residents reported being touched or pushed by unseen hands. Cold spots, sometimes accompanied by sudden drops in temperature, were frequently observed, while shadowy figures were glimpsed moving just beyond the edge of vision. The house seemed to possess a presence that could not be captured, catalogued, or constrained, leaving its observers both terrified and fascinated. Contemporary explanations varied widely. Local newspapers and letters often framed the events as pranks by mischievous servants or overactive imaginations. Skeptics suggested that the combination of isolation, old architecture, and natural settling noises could account for many of the reported phenomena. Indeed, the house's timber floors, uneven stonework, and hidden alcoves might produce sounds or movements that startled even the most rational observer. Yet, the frequency, variety, and coordination of the disturbances made purely structural explanations difficult to sustain. Could ordinary architecture account for chairs flying across rooms, or objects appearing in entirely new locations, seemingly defying gravity and logic? Folkloric and cultural context provides additional layers of interpretation. Scotland has long been steeped in stories of restless spirits, hauntings, and supernatural phenomena tied to ancestral lands. Tales of poltergeists, vengeful spirits, and cursed estates were part of local culture, and the Ballechin events may have been filtered through these traditions. However, the consistency of reports, across multiple witnesses, both family and servants, suggests that the occurrences were not merely the product of suggestion. How did the accounts align so closely, often describing similar effects at similar times, yet evade explanation by both rational and folkloric lenses? The nature of the disturbances at Ballechin House also raises questions about agency. Unlike passive hauntings, where objects may shift or lights flicker, the reported activity at Ballechin often appeared deliberate. Doors were locked from the inside. Objects moved in patterns suggesting observation and intent, and some witnesses reported being chased or cornered by unseen forces. This sense of purpose, coupled with the house's isolation, amplified fear and anxiety, creating a palpable tension that seemed to pervade the very air. Could an unseen entity truly exhibit such intelligence? Or were these manifestations of a more subtle psychological phenomenon, an interaction between expectation, fear, and environment? Fringe interpretations have persisted, blending documented history with speculation. Some researchers propose that residual energy from past events or occupants might have become imprinted upon the house, manifesting sporadically to those sensitive to it. Others consider the possibility of a poltergeist phenomenon linked to human emotion, where psychic energy is unconsciously projected into the environment, creating tangible effects. Though unprovable, these theories provide a framework for understanding why the activity at Ballechin was both so intense and so focused, affecting specific areas and responding to human presence. Could such a force exist, imperceptible except through its interaction with physical objects and human perception? The Ballechin case is also notable for the variety of phenomena reported. Beyond moving objects, witnesses documented strange sounds, whispers, footsteps, and occasional unexplained knocks or bangs. Some reported apparitions, often described as shadowy figures or vague human shapes that appeared fleetingly in corridors or reflected in mirrors. These events created a multi-sensory experience, blending sight, sound, and touch in ways that confounded observation and recording. In some instances, the activity seemed to respond to the actions of the inhabitants, as if aware of attempts to investigate or contain it. Such responsiveness remains one of the most compelling and perplexing aspects of the haunting. Attempts to investigate or manage the disturbances were largely ineffective. Families tried sealing rooms, moving furniture, and implementing vigilant watches, yet the activity continued unabated. Paranormal investigators, both contemporary and later, documented extensive notes, diagrams, and timelines, yet no definitive cause was ever identified. The evidence, while extensive and detailed, remained fragmentary, leaving the impression that the house itself was a conduit for phenomena that escaped conventional understanding. How can one reconcile such detailed observation with the absence of a clear explanation, and what does that suggest about the limits of human perception? Even today, Ballechin House retains its aura of mystery. Scholars, folklorists, and paranormal enthusiasts continue to study the case, examining archival records, letters, and first-hand accounts. The house stands as a potent example of how ordinary domestic spaces can host extraordinary experiences, how human consciousness interacts with physical environments, and how fear and expectation shape perception. It also challenges us to consider the boundaries between documented fact and subjective experience. Were the disturbances caused by an intelligent entity, the echo of past events, or a complex interplay of psychology and environment? Or do we encounter, in Ballechin, phenomena that defy rational categorization entirely? The legacy of Ballechin House speaks to broader questions about mystery, perception, and the unseen world. Like spring-heeled Jack leaping across London rooftops, the London monster stalking the streets, and the mad stone igniting panic in New England, Ballechin demonstrates how ordinary lives can intersect with extraordinary events. In its corridors, shadows, and whispered sounds, we glimpse the interplay of fear, culture, and the unknown, leaving us to wonder how many such enigmas exist beyond the scope of our attention. As we leave the misty hills of Perthshire behind, the questions endure. What remains in Ballechin House, unseen yet present, waiting for those who dare to notice? How much of the haunting was shaped by human perception, and how much by forces beyond comprehension? And how many other locations in our world harbor phenomena that evade explanation, quietly influencing our lives, waiting to be discovered? In contemplating Ballechin, we are reminded that the line between the known and the mysterious is often thinner than we imagine, and that some questions may never be fully answered. From the misty hills of Perthshire, where Ballechin House seemed alive with invisible forces, we return now to the crowded streets of London, nearly a century earlier, to a narrow alley where fear and fascination would merge into a spectacle of panic and intrigue. The year is 1762, and London is a city of gaslit thoroughfares, timbered townhouses, and the constant murmur of commerce, conversation, and human ambition. In this dense urban fabric lies Cock Lane, a small street in the heart of the city, unremarkable in appearance yet destined to become the epicenter of one of England's most notorious ghost panics. Cock Lane itself was a narrow, winding street, lined with modest dwellings and the occasional shop. Its walls, darkened with soot and age, enclosed a network of staircases and attics, while the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on the uneven cobblestones echoed in the confined space. Within one of these houses, a series of events would unfold that blurred the line between the living and the dead, capturing the imagination of Londoners and turning ordinary domestic life into a theater of terror. The phenomenon centered around a young girl named Elizabeth Parsons, the daughter of a resident tenant. Reports indicate that the first unusual incidents were subtle: unexplained knocking sounds at night, faint scratches on furniture, and cold spots that seemed to move across rooms. Initially dismissed as mischievous behavior by children or the creaking of an old house, the occurrences soon escalated. The knocks and raps increased in frequency and appeared to follow coherent patterns, seemingly in response to specific questions asked by household members or visitors. These communications were interpreted as messages from the spirit of a deceased lodger, sparking a wave of curiosity, dread, and speculation. Eyewitness accounts of the Cock Lane ghost describe a presence that was both playful and menacing. Individuals reported the knocks corresponding to questions, spelling out alleged truths and lies, or even answering inquiries about matters of inheritance and morality. The activity often peaked at night, when the household was quiet and shadows stretched across the narrow corridors. Observers claimed to hear groans, footsteps, and other unexplained sounds emanating from empty rooms, reinforcing the sense that the house was alive with intelligence beyond the ordinary. How could such precise communication occur without a living agent? And what force, if any, was responsible for these seemingly deliberate messages? The social and cultural response to the Cock Lane events was swift and intense. London newspapers, pamphlets, and letters chronicled the occurrences in great detail, spreading fear, fascination, and speculation throughout the city. Crowds gathered to witness the supposed ghost, turning a domestic disturbance into a public spectacle. Some viewed the events as proof of the afterlife, while others expressed concern about deception and fraud. Clergy, legal authorities, and journalists became involved, examining the claims with varying degrees of skepticism and seriousness. In this environment, the line between genuine mystery and public performance became increasingly blurred, yet the intensity of the reactions was undeniable. Mainstream historical explanations have focused on the likelihood of trickery and manipulation. Investigations revealed that Elizabeth Parsons may have been coached by family members to produce the raps and knocks, creating the illusion of a communicating spirit. Some have argued that the events were entirely fabricated for attention, financial gain, or social leverage. Yet the scale and fervor of the panic suggest that psychological and cultural factors also played a significant role. Could the fear of spirits, widespread beliefs in the supernatural, and the collective desire for mystery have amplified ordinary noises into a full-blown citywide phenomenon? How much of the Cock Lane panic was shaped by expectation, and how much by deliberate orchestration? The Cock Lane case also illustrates the interplay between perception, suggestion, and urban legend. In a crowded city, where rumors travel quickly and curiosity abounds, small incidents can escalate into widespread hysteria. Eyewitnesses often reported similar patterns: raps following questions, sudden movements, and glimpses of shadowy figures. While many of these accounts were later questioned or debunked, they persisted in print and memory, solidifying the ghost's presence in the public imagination. The phenomenon thus becomes both an historical curiosity and a case study in the dynamics of belief, fear, and social contagion. Fringe theories surrounding the Cock Lane ghost include speculation about poltergeist activity or residual energy. Some commentators suggest that the house itself may have amplified certain sounds or movements, allowing them to be interpreted as intelligent responses. Others consider the possibility that Elizabeth Parsons possessed an unusual degree of control over subtle physical phenomena, whether consciously or unconsciously, creating experiences that felt supernatural to observers. While none of these theories can be definitively confirmed, they highlight the complexity of the case, in which cultural expectations, environmental factors, and human behavior intertwine to produce phenomena that remain compelling to this day. The documented investigations into Cock Lane involved meticulous observation and testing. Witnesses were questioned repeatedly, and attempts were made to catch the source of the noises in the act. Yet even when fraud was suspected, some events remained unexplained or were reported independently by multiple observers. The combination of apparent communication, dramatic public attention, and the persistence of the narrative created a layered mystery, one that could be analyzed scientifically, yet continued to provoke wonder and unease. Could some elements of the haunting have defied conventional understanding, slipping through the boundaries of rational explanation? The Cock Lane ghost panic also illuminates the broader social anxieties of 18th century London. The city, undergoing rapid population growth, economic change, and social flux, was fertile ground for stories that combined fear, morality, and curiosity. Questions of legitimacy, inheritance, and social order were entwined with beliefs in spirits, creating a backdrop in which a simple domestic disturbance could ignite widespread panic. The events of Cock Lane reflect how mystery and fear can intersect with social context, producing a phenomenon that resonates far beyond the physical boundaries of a single house. Even centuries later, the Cock Lane events continue to fascinate historians, folklorists, and paranormal enthusiasts. The story remains a compelling example of how human perception, cultural expectations, and unexplained phenomena can converge, producing experiences that feel both credible and terrifying. The mystery endures because it sits at the intersection of historical documentation and the unknown. Letters, pamphlets, and newspaper articles preserve the narrative, yet questions about authenticity, intention, and the nature of the phenomena remain unresolved. As we reflect on the Cock Lane ghost panic, it becomes clear that the case is not merely about a girl, a house, or mysterious knocks, but about the human need to confront the unknown. The events invite us to consider how fear shapes perception, how social dynamics amplify mystery, and how ordinary spaces can host experiences that challenge our understanding. How much of what was witnessed was real, and how much was created by imagination, expectation, or misperception? Could there be forces, psychological, environmental, or perhaps something beyond ordinary experience, that continue to manifest in ways we cannot yet comprehend? The Cock Lane ghost reminds us that even in familiar, everyday surroundings, the extraordinary can emerge, unbidden and enigmatic. Like the hauntings at Ballechin House, the terrifying leaps of spring-heeled Jack, or the shadowy presence of the London Monster, these events encourage reflection, curiosity, and wonder. In contemplating Cock Lane, we are left with a profound question. What hidden stories, subtle phenomena, or unperceived forces might still linger in the spaces we inhabit, quietly shaping our experience of the world, waiting for the perceptive eye, or the brave observer, to notice? From the cramped, shadowed streets of London, where ghostly knocks stirred panic, we now turn across the Atlantic to the open waters of the Atlantic Ocean in the early 20th century, where a mystery of an entirely different nature, vast, silent, and inexorably chilling, would capture the imagination of sailors, investigators, and the public alike. It is the story of the Carroll A. Deering, a 5-masted schooner whose crew vanished without trace in 1921, leaving behind a vessel adrift and a mystery that has never been fully resolved. The Carroll A. Deering was a formidable sight, a schooner of over 200 feet in length, her white-painted hull glinting against the Atlantic waves as she sailed under full sail. Built for trade, the vessel had traversed the Atlantic multiple times, carrying goods from the east coast of the United States to ports in the Caribbean and beyond. But in the fall of 1921, something inexplicable would unfold aboard her decks. The ship was discovered aground off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, abandoned, its rigging intact, the helm unmanned, and the crew nowhere to be found. What had happened to the men who had once navigated this vessel across thousands of miles of ocean? The first reports of the Deering's disappearance emerged when local fishermen and Coast Guard officials came across the ship. Its anchor was down, sails partially set, and personal belongings still stowed in cabins. A single lifeboat was missing, yet there were no signs of struggle or storm damage severe enough to account for the abandonment. Food supplies were largely untouched, and the logbook ended abruptly, offering no final explanation. Whoever had left the ship had done so with intention, yet left no clear trail, no indication of the direction they had gone. How could an entire crew vanish from a vessel of this size without leaving a trace? Initial investigations by the Coast Guard and the Bureau of Navigation suggested several possible scenarios. Piracy, though less common in the Atlantic than in centuries past, was considered, as was mutiny. Could the crew have been lured overboard, forced into some violent confrontation, or persuaded to abandon ship in a calculated maneuver? Evidence was sparse. Other theories pointed to navigational errors, sudden storms, or accidental disaster at sea. But the weather records indicate that conditions were not severe enough to explain such a disappearance. The questions mounted, and each explanation seemed incomplete, leaving the mystery of the Deering unresolved. The vessel itself provided tantalizing yet frustrating clues. The captain's personal effects, including charts and logbooks, were present and undisturbed. Cabin doors were locked, and no signs of struggle or injury were observed. The ship's wheel, still secured to the helm, suggested that whoever had left the vessel had done so quickly, yet deliberately, without disturbing the normal order of operations. Observers noted that certain rigging lines were strangely tangled, as if hastily adjusted, yet these observations were contradictory, offering no consistent narrative. Was this the work of human hands in a sudden crisis? Or could other, less conventional forces have been at play? Speculative theories surrounding the Deering often drift into the extraordinary. Some suggest encounters with pirates or foreign agents, though no evidence was ever uncovered to support such claims. Others propose that the ship sailed into the vicinity of the infamous Bermuda Triangle, where currents, magnetic anomalies, and atmospheric conditions could create disorientation, hallucination, or even sudden disappearance. Psychological explanations consider mass panic or decision-making under stress, where the crew may have abandoned ship based on fear of an unseen threat. Yet none of these scenarios fully accounts for the absence of bodies, the orderly condition of the ship, or the lack of any lifeboat debris beyond the single missing boat. Eyewitness accounts from those who discovered the Deering amplify the sense of the uncanny. Local Coast Guard officers described the vessel as eerily silent, drifting like a phantom against the horizon. Fishermen recalled the air of abandonment, with rigging swaying in the wind, sails taut without a hand to guide them, and the ocean stretching empty beyond the bow. In each report, there is a shared impression that the ship, once a hub of human activity, had been evacuated in a manner so complete and precise it seemed almost impossible. Could an entire crew simply disappear, leaving no living trace, as if they had been erased from the ship and the sea itself? The Carroll A. Deering incident has persisted in the public imagination for nearly a century, inspiring books, documentaries, and ongoing research. Each new exploration, whether by maritime historians, oceanographers, or enthusiasts, uncovers details that deepen the mystery rather than resolve it. Contemporary newspapers chronicled the initial discovery and subsequent investigation, describing the eerie quiet of the vessel, the absence of a crew, and the bafflement of investigators. Over time, the story became emblematic of maritime mystery. A ship found intact, functional, and yet devoid of the very people who should have been steering it. Environmental and navigational analyses have been applied retrospectively to the case. Currents off Cape Hatteras are strong and unpredictable, and fog or sudden squalls could create confusion or disorientation. Yet these factors cannot account for the complete disappearance of an entire crew, nor for the preservation of personal effects and order aboard the vessel. Even if the crew abandoned ship voluntarily, what circumstances could compel them to leave everything behind, and where could they have gone in such a remote part of the Atlantic? The more one examines the physical evidence, the more the mystery deepens. The human element of the Carroll A. Deering case is equally compelling. The crew were ordinary men, skilled sailors accustomed to the perils of the sea. Their sudden disappearance was not a product of inexperience or negligence. The captain, whose meticulous logbooks remained, was known for discipline and careful navigation. How could such a group, trained to endure storms and uncertainty, simply vanish without leaving definitive evidence? Was there a single decisive event, sudden and overwhelming, or a series of small misjudgments amplified by unknown factors? In considering the vanishing of the Carroll A. Deering crew, we are confronted with enduring questions. What forces, natural, human, or otherwise, could produce such an outcome? How many incidents of unexplained disappearance have been lost to history, leaving only fragments of narrative and speculation behind? And what does the Deering tell us about the fragility of human control in the face of the vast, unpredictable ocean? Like Ballechin House, Cock Lane, and Spring-Heeled Jack, the mystery of the Deering challenges our assumptions, compelling us to acknowledge that some events remain tantalizingly beyond understanding. As we gaze upon the empty decks and silent rigging of the Carroll A. Deering, the questions linger, unresolved. Where did the crew go, and why? Were they victims of accident, foul play, or forces we have yet to comprehend? And more broadly, how many other vessels, lives, or moments in history vanish into uncertainty, leaving only a trail of unanswered questions for those who follow? In contemplating the Deering, we are reminded that the world is vast, the unknown remains plentiful, and that the line between order and inexplicable disappearance is far thinner than we often realize. From the silent decks of the Carroll A. Deering, abandoned to the Atlantic waves, we now return to solid ground, yet one that would, in its own unsettling way, prove just as mysterious. The year is 1944, and in the heart of Illinois, the small city of Mattoon became the stage for a phenomenon that would perplex scientists, alarm residents, and capture the attention of the nation. Unlike vanished sailors or ghostly knocks, the terror in Mattoon was invisible, a gaseous specter that no one could see, touch, or measure with conventional instruments, yet whose presence was felt deeply by the people it affected. Mattoon itself was typical of small Midwestern towns of the 1940s, a network of quiet streets lined with modest homes, a downtown district with shops and cafes, and neighborhoods punctuated by schools and factories. Life moved at a predictable rhythm, shaped by wartime demands and the routines of ordinary citizens. It was into this seemingly ordinary environment that an extraordinary and inexplicable phenomenon intruded. Residents began to notice peculiar odors, faint and chemical, that seemed to emanate from nowhere. What started as a curious nuisance quickly escalated into widespread fear and confusion as strange symptoms appeared in those exposed. Reports from the time describe people experiencing nausea, dizziness, headaches, and a pervasive sense of unease. Animals behaved erratically. Household pets were observed cowering or fleeing from areas where the gas was suspected to be present. Doors were opened to ventilate homes, yet the odor persisted, drifting unpredictably through streets and alleyways. Schools and businesses noticed absences as children and workers alike succumbed to malaise. Those affected were often the first to describe a tingling or burning sensation in their nostrils, accompanied by an almost hypnotic dizziness. Could an invisible, unidentified substance be causing such profound effects, or were the incidents a psychological contagion amplified by rumor and panic? Authorities and scientists responded swiftly, attempting to identify the source of the mysterious gas. Firefighters, police, and municipal officials conducted inspections, sampling the air and examining local industrial operations for leaks or chemical discharges. Gas masks were donned, windows opened, and barricades considered. Yet despite exhaustive testing, no measurable levels of toxic gases or industrial pollutants were detected. The more investigations were conducted, the more baffling the situation became. A pervasive presence affecting hundreds of residents, yet invisible to instruments designed to detect it. How could an entire town experience symptoms of exposure without any detectable chemical culprit? The social dynamics of the Mattoon panic intensified the mystery. As word spread, fear compounded the effects. Individuals reported sensations more intensely when aware that others were experiencing similar symptoms. Schools temporarily closed, offices saw absentee rates spike, and families debated whether it was safe to remain in their homes. In the absence of clear explanation, speculation flourished. Some feared sabotage, imagining enemy agents using chemical weapons on domestic soil during wartime. Others suggested secret military experiments, while a few posited that unknown natural phenomena, mysterious gases rising from the earth, might be responsible. Each theory, while plausible in some measure, ultimately failed to account for the entire scope of the events. Scientific analysis at the time suggested several possible explanations. Some researchers proposed the effects were psychosomatic, a form of mass hysteria triggered by environmental cues and social anxiety. Others speculated that the gas was a natural emission, perhaps from decaying vegetation or subterranean chemical reactions carried through the town by wind patterns. Yet both explanations encountered difficulties. Symptoms were consistent and often severe, and reports came from multiple areas that were not contiguous, suggesting a pattern inconsistent with purely environmental causes. How can we reconcile the presence of tangible, observable effects with an apparent absence of a measurable source? Eyewitness testimony paints a vivid picture of the town in the grip of the phenomenon. Residents recalled walking through streets with a faint, acrid smell in the air, unable to pinpoint its origin. Families reported sudden waves of dizziness indoors, prompting them to flee into the streets in search of relief. Children described a strange metallic taste in their mouths and an urge to cover their noses, while pets trembled or hid under furniture. Even those skeptical of the phenomenon admitted to an undeniable sense of unease, an atmosphere thick with tension, fear, and anticipation of an invisible threat. Could a mere rumor, magnified by collective anxiety, have produced physical symptoms so consistently across a population? Or was there, somewhere, a real agent at work, simply undetectable to the instruments of the day? Fringe theories have persisted for decades, feeding the enduring fascination with the Mattoon gas panic. Some suggest experimental wartime chemicals accidentally released into the atmosphere, while others speculate about rare geological emissions of natural gases. Paranormal explanations, though less commonly cited in scientific discourse, propose that the events might represent an instance of environmental energy interacting with human perception, creating symptoms without a detectable physical cause. Each of these theories, while speculative, underscores the complex interplay of observable phenomena, perception, and context in Mattoon. The Mattoon events highlight the limitations of observation and the challenges of interpretation. Despite extensive contemporary reporting, newspaper articles, and scientific inquiry, no definitive cause has been established. The mystery persists because it occupies the intersection of science, psychology, and social behavior. Ordinary people experienced real symptoms, documented and reported, yet conventional explanation remains elusive. The phenomenon defies easy categorization. It was neither a conventional chemical leak nor entirely imagined, existing instead in a liminal space between physical reality and the limits of measurement. As the Mattoon gas panic subsided, the town gradually returned to normal life, yet the questions lingered. Residents continued to debate the source of the gas, and researchers revisited records, piecing together patterns that might shed light on what occurred. The event serves as a reminder of how quickly fear can spread, how invisible forces, whether chemical, psychological, or otherwise, can disrupt ordinary life, and how some mysteries evade closure despite rigorous observation and investigation. In contemplating the Mattoon gas panic, we are faced with enduring questions. What exactly caused the strange malaise and sensory disturbances experienced by the town? Was it a natural anomaly, a secretive experiment, or a social phenomenon amplified by fear? And beyond the specifics, how many other unexplained occurrences exist, subtle, transient, and difficult to measure, yet real to those who experience them. Like the vanished crew of the Carroll A. Deering, the ghostly knocks of Cock Lane, or the restless corridors of Ballechin House, Mattoon reminds us that the world is full of mysteries waiting to be noticed, studied, and perhaps never fully explained. The invisible presence that gripped Mattoon in 1944 may have vanished, leaving behind only stories and speculation. Yet its memory endures, urging us to consider the fragile boundary between the known and the unknown, between physical measurement and human perception. In reflecting on the panic, we are reminded that the world may still harbor hidden forces, subtle disturbances, and unexplained phenomena, sometimes silent, sometimes sensed, always inviting curiosity and wonder. From the invisible fears that haunted Mattoon, Illinois, in 1944, we return across the Atlantic to the crowded streets and shadowed lanes of London, a city whose history is no stranger to mystery, fear, and tragic misunderstanding. It is the year 1804, and Hammersmith, a district of winding streets, gas-lit lamps, and quiet squares, is about to become the scene of a case that is at once a social panic, a fatal misjudgment, and a lingering question about perception, fear, and human error. The streets of Hammersmith in the early 19th century were a blend of residential homes and small workshops, with gas lamps flickering along narrow pavements, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe as the night deepened. On one such evening, a sense of unease pervaded the area. Local residents reported sightings of a figure, described as pale, ghostly, and moving silently along the streets. Some claimed the figure glided unnaturally, like a specter from a tale of the supernatural. The reports were sparse at first, whispered over fences and through candlelit windows. Yet fear has a way of gathering momentum, and soon the ghost of Hammersmith became a topic of daily conversation, spreading anxiety through the neighborhood. The man at the center of this unfolding drama was Thomas Millwood, a local laborer who, like many others, had been alarmed by the reported ghost sightings. As reports of the apparition persisted, residents became increasingly on edge. Some carried sticks, others lanterns, each fearful of encountering the spectral figure that had begun to haunt their streets. One evening, Millwood encountered a man walking along the lane and, convinced he was confronting the infamous ghost, shot him with a pistol. Tragically, the man he shot, George Hatch, was entirely human, an unfortunate victim of fear, mistaken identity, and the collective anxiety that had taken root in Hammersmith. Investigations into the incident reveal a complex tapestry of social, psychological, and cultural factors. The Hammersmith ghost panic was fueled by folklore, local superstition, and the very human tendency to see patterns or threats where none exist. Gas lamps, shadows, and uneven streets contributed to misperceptions. Individuals walking alone at night, perhaps hunched against the chill or moving silently along cobbled lanes, could easily be mistaken for something otherworldly. Yet the case also demonstrates how rumor and fear can escalate rapidly, prompting actions with fatal consequences. How much of what we perceive in moments of fear is shaped by external reality, and how much by the stories we tell ourselves? The legal aftermath of the Hammersmith shooting was as remarkable as the incident itself. Millwood was arrested and charged with murder, though the courts ultimately determined that he had acted under a genuine, if tragically mistaken, belief that he was defending his community from a supernatural threat. This ruling highlighted a curious intersection of law, belief, and human psychology. The law recognized the reality of fear, yet could not ignore the irreversible consequence of a single action shaped by collective anxiety. Could the human mind, conditioned by rumor and prior expectations, transform shadows and ordinary figures into threats so compelling that reason and caution are overwhelmed? Contemporary accounts paint a vivid picture of the social dynamics at play. Residents of Hammersmith spoke of nightly vigilante patrols, whispered warnings to friends and neighbors, and a shared conviction that the ghost was real. Parents cautioned children to avoid the streets after dark, while shopkeepers secured their doors and lanterns flickered ominously in shop windows. In this environment, ordinary movements, a man walking home from work, the flutter of a curtain in the wind, were enough to spark panic. The Hammersmith ghost thus becomes not merely a story of one fatal encounter, but a study in the dynamics of collective fear, how it spreads, how it distorts perception, and how it can catalyze tragic outcomes. Scholars examining the Hammersmith incident have offered multiple explanations. Some frame it as an early example of mass hysteria or social contagion, in which a small number of initial reports propagated fear throughout the community. Others suggest that environmental factors, shadows, low light, atmospheric conditions, enhanced the likelihood of misperception, transforming mundane events into alarming experiences. Psychological interpretations explore the roles of stress, fatigue, and expectation. When individuals anticipate danger, the mind can reinterpret ordinary stimuli as extraordinary threats. Yet even with these frameworks, the story remains haunting. Why was the reaction so rapid and so extreme? And why did it culminate in a fatal shooting? Fringe theories and local lore have also contributed to the enduring fascination with the Hammersmith ghost. Some narratives embellish the account with spectral characteristics, describing a pale, silent figure that seemed almost detached from physical reality. Others suggest that social tension, competition for resources, neighborhood disputes, or wartime anxieties may have amplified the panic, projecting collective fear onto a solitary figure walking the streets. While these interpretations remain speculative, they underscore a core truth. The Hammersmith incident exists at the intersection of perception, belief, and consequence, illustrating how mysteries of human experience can rival even the most eerie tales of the supernatural. The fatal encounter between Millwood and Hatch serves as a somber reminder of the consequences of fear left unchecked. It forces us to consider not only the social context of Hammersmith in 1804, but also the timeless vulnerability of humans to misperception. How easily can a shadow become a threat, a figure a ghost, a story a reality? And more broadly, how many other moments in history, unnoticed or undocumented, resulted from the same subtle misalignment of expectation and perception, fear and action? As the Hammersmith ghost case has been revisited over centuries, it continues to challenge assumptions about reason, belief, and social behavior. It demonstrates that even in the heart of a bustling city, amid ordinary streets and familiar faces, the unknown, whether psychological, environmental, or otherwise, can exert a profound influence. Like the Carroll A. Deering drifting silently across the Atlantic, the Mattoon gas that invisibly swept through Illinois, or the Cock Lane ghost that rattled London's windows, the Hammersmith episode reveals that human experience is often shaped by forces we barely perceive, yet feel with unmistakable intensity. The story invites reflection. Could ordinary people, confronted with ambiguity and fear, act in ways that seem extraordinary, tragic, or inexplicable in retrospect? How many other ghosts have haunted communities, provoking panic, misunderstanding, or even violence? And in contemplating Hammersmith, are we reminded not only of the frailty of perception, but of the enduring mystery inherent in human experience, where unseen forces, whether atmospheric, psychological, or cultural, continue to shape events in ways we may never fully comprehend? In the quiet streets of modern Hammersmith, where gas lamps have been replaced and shadows fall differently, the story of the ghost shooting persists as both cautionary tale and historical enigma. It reminds us that fear, once awakened, is difficult to contain, and that the boundaries between the seen and unseen, the real and imagined, are often thinner than we would like to believe. The Hammersmith ghost endures as a testament to the strange power of collective imagination, the fragility of human perception, and the chilling consequences that can arise when ordinary people confront the extraordinary in the streets of their everyday lives. From the narrow streets of Hammersmith, where a ghostly figure inspired fear and tragedy in 1804, we now journey across the globe to the vast, unpredictable expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Far from city lamps and cobbled lanes, the sea stretches endlessly, a horizon that melts into sky, with depths so dark and currents so swift that even experienced sailors can feel utterly at the mercy of forces beyond their control. Here, in a region that would come to be known as the Devil's Sea, or the Dragon's Triangle, entire vessels have vanished, crews disappeared, and mysteries unfolded that rival the most enigmatic legends of maritime history. The Devil's Sea, situated near the Japanese archipelago, is a stretch of ocean both remote and treacherous. Early reports from the 19th century describe waters that can shift without warning, storms appearing suddenly, and navigational instruments that allegedly falter in strange, inexplicable ways. It was in these waters that numerous ships, traveling for trade or exploration, met fates that remain largely undocumented, leaving nothing but fragments of reports, occasional wreckage, or, in many cases, complete absence. These disappearances often involved vessels that were otherwise seaworthy, captained by experienced mariners, and prepared for the challenges of the open ocean. Yet time and again, entire crews and their ships seemed to vanish, swallowed by the sea as if by design or some unseen hand. Contemporary accounts, sparse, often second-hand, and sometimes tinged with embellishment, describe these events with the language of disbelief. Sailors returning from distant ports would whisper of ships spotted near the Dragon's Triangle, only to vanish before reaching safe waters. Some noted unusual fogs, sudden squalls, or magnetic anomalies that rendered compasses unreliable, while others recalled peculiar sea swells, waters that glowed or shifted in unnatural colors, or eerie silences where one would expect the roar of the ocean. Could these phenomena have a rational explanation, or did the sea itself harbor forces beyond comprehension? The early 19th century reports are both frustrating and compelling because they offer just enough detail to provoke intrigue while leaving essential questions unanswered. Merchant ships that departed Japan bound for Southeast Asia sometimes never arrived. Fishing vessels returned empty, crews missing, and personal belongings intact. In some cases, lifeboats were discovered adrift, unoccupied, or marked with strange signs, though these accounts are anecdotal and difficult to verify. What seems consistent across these reports is an eerie, almost deliberate selectivity. Ships and crews vanish, yet the vessels themselves often appear undamaged, as if time and circumstance conspired to erase the human element while preserving the tools of navigation. Various explanations have been proposed over the centuries. Natural phenomena such as rogue waves, sudden typhoons, volcanic gas emissions, or strong oceanic currents could account for some disappearances. Geological surveys indicate the region is seismically active, suggesting the possibility of underwater disturbances that might destabilize vessels or create unpredictable currents. Magnetic anomalies have also been cited, potentially causing navigational errors that could steer ships off course, into peril, or into waters from which they never returned. Yet even the most rational analyses fail to explain all cases. How could entire crews disappear with so little physical evidence, while vessels sometimes wash ashore, or remain unaccounted for entirely? Some historical observers turned to more extraordinary possibilities. Stories circulated of phantom ships, spectral lights over the water, or sea creatures large and unknown. These accounts, while difficult to verify, capture a shared human sense of dread when confronted with forces beyond understanding. The combination of deep ocean mystery, sudden storms, and unexplained disappearances created a fertile environment for legend. mariners themselves began to whisper that the Devil's Sea was not merely dangerous, but alive with an intelligence or malice beyond human comprehension. Was this fear a reflection of real phenomena misinterpreted through superstition? Or might there have been events that even modern science struggles to fully explain? Eyewitness testimony, though scarce, reinforces the eerie consistency of these reports. Sailors often described seeing ships vanish over the horizon, or finding waters calm one moment and violently turbulent the next, with no apparent cause. Survivors sometimes reported disorientation, a sudden loss of time, or inability to locate familiar landmarks. In an era when communication was limited and verification of accounts nearly impossible, the Devil's Sea became a repository of collective uncertainty and dread, a place where ordinary experience seemed suspended and reason was challenged by circumstance. Psychologists and historians examining these early 19th century incidents suggest that fear, isolation, and the monotony of long ocean voyages may have amplified perception of danger. The mind at sea, exposed to vast, uniform horizons and extreme environmental conditions, is highly suggestible. Misinterpretations of natural events, a fog bank, a school of fish, a sudden squall, could transform into stories of disappearance or supernatural interference. Yet even acknowledging the human mind's role does not eliminate the concrete evidence. Ships still failed to reach port, and lives were irrevocably lost. There remains an inescapable material mystery intertwined with psychological uncertainty. Modern comparisons often invoke the Bermuda Triangle, where similar patterns of disappearance, navigational anomalies, and storm-related loss have been documented. The Devil's Sea shares many of these characteristics: isolated ocean territory, unpredictable weather, strong currents, and a history of unexplained vanishings. But what makes these early 19th century accounts compelling is their timing and consistency, predating advanced maritime technology, satellite observation, or global communication. Sailors depended entirely on rudimentary navigation, celestial observation, and instinct, and yet multiple independent accounts report phenomena that challenge the limits of natural explanation. The Devil's Sea is also a reminder of the broader mysteries of the ocean itself. Vast, largely unmapped, and subject to forces both visible and hidden, the world's oceans have always inspired awe and fear. Even today, unexplored trenches, underwater volcanoes, and complex currents remind us of how little is fully understood. The disappearances reported in the early 19th century exist at this intersection. Part documented history, part legend, part enduring human fascination with the unknown. Could there have been phenomena lost to time, currents, and human memory, patterns or forces that left no trace but terror and speculation? As we reflect on the Devil's Sea, the questions endure. How many ships and crews vanished without record, swallowed by waters whose patterns are still only partially understood? To what extent did natural forces conspire with human perception to produce the stories that have persisted through centuries? And beyond explanation, what does the legacy of these disappearances tell us about the fragile boundary between the known and the unknown, between human expectation and the unpredictable vastness of nature? The early 19th century reports of the Devil's Sea remind us that mystery does not require dramatic visuals or supernatural trappings. Sometimes, it is the silent, empty ocean, the vanished vessel, and the unanswered questions that elicit the deepest chill. Like the Hammersmith ghost, the Carroll A. Deering, and the Mattoon gas panic, the Devil's Sea speaks to the enduring human fascination with what we cannot fully understand, inviting both caution and wonder as we ponder the forces that shape the world around us. From the foreboding expanse of the Devil's Sea, where entire vessels and crews vanished into the mysterious Pacific, we return to the North Atlantic, to the windswept shores and busy harbors of Gloucester, Massachusetts. It is the year 1817, and the salt tang of the ocean mingles with the industrious bustle of a coastal town whose livelihood depends on the sea. Fishermen's boats bob against the waves, gulls wheel overhead, and the horizon stretches unbroken, a vast silvery canvas that has both sustained life and inspired tales of the inexplicable. It was here, amid the ordinary rhythms of maritime labor, that an extraordinary phenomenon captured the attention of an entire community: the sightings of what would become known as the Gloucester sea serpent. The first reports emerged on a calm, clear morning. Fishermen and townsfolk, scanning the waters for schools of fish or the distant sails of trading vessels, noticed a strange movement beneath the surface. Witnesses described a long, undulating creature, its body dark and glistening, cutting through the waves with a sinuous, almost deliberate motion. Some claimed to see humps rising and falling above the water, while others noted a head-like structure that seemed disproportionately large, with an undulating neck that moved independently of the body. The sheer size suggested a creature unlike anything familiar to local mariners, challenging the boundaries of known marine life and igniting a blend of curiosity, fear, and disbelief. As days passed, the sightings multiplied. Observers reported encounters from multiple vantage points: fishermen in small dories, crews aboard larger vessels, and townspeople watching from piers. Descriptions varied, yet shared consistent details: length estimated at 50 to 70 feet, serpentine movement, and scales or ridges glinting in the sunlight. The accounts were recorded with care in newspapers, personal journals, and letters, some including crude sketches of the creature as seen from afar. The reports spread rapidly, stirring both local and national attention. How could such a creature remain undetected by science, yet appear so vividly to so many reliable witnesses? The social and psychological dimensions of the Gloucester sightings cannot be ignored. In a town whose economy and culture revolved around the sea, the line between observation and imagination was fragile. Long hours at sea, exposure to the elements, and the subtle play of light on waves could distort perception. Yet the sheer number of independent reports, coupled with the consistency of details, lent the phenomenon an unusual credibility. Could this have been a case of mass misidentification? Or was there truly an unknown creature gliding beneath the waters of Cape Ann? Contemporary attempts at explanation varied widely. Some proposed that the witnesses had encountered a known marine species, such as a giant squid, oarfish, or large whale, seen at an unusual angle. Others considered the possibility of a previously undiscovered sea serpent, a relic of deep evolutionary history, perhaps a species surviving beyond scientific awareness. Some suggested optical illusions, floating logs, wave patterns, or schools of fish moving in coordinated formations that mimicked the movement of a long, sinuous body. Yet none of these explanations fully accounted for the sustained observations, the apparent size of the creature, or the reactions of those who claimed to have seen it for extended periods. Eyewitness testimony from the Gloucester sightings is remarkable in its specificity. One fisherman described the creature rising nearly 8 feet above the water, with a head like a horse or dragon, and a body stretching far beyond the visible waves. Another observer noted the serpent making sudden, rapid movements, diving beneath the surface, only to reappear minutes later in a different location, suggesting intelligence or at least extraordinary mobility. Even skeptics found themselves unsettled. The phenomenon was not confined to a single individual's imagination, but was witnessed by groups, sometimes including children, sailors, and townspeople simultaneously. How could so many independent observers report similar features if there were nothing real beneath the waves? Fringe theories also emerged, adding layers of intrigue to the mystery. Some speculated that the Gloucester sea serpent was a surviving prehistoric species, a relic from a distant geological epoch when massive marine reptiles roamed the oceans. Others suggested that it might represent a cryptid, an unknown form of life evolved in isolation, capable of eluding human detection for centuries. Paranormal explanations, while less documented, imagined a creature with semi-supernatural attributes, appearing and disappearing at will, influencing perception and imagination in ways we do not fully understand. Each hypothesis reflects humanity's enduring fascination with what lies beyond observation and measurement, reminding us of the limits of knowledge and the allure of the unknown. Naturalistic explanations, though plausible, are not without complications. For instance, large whales or oarfish could create undulating movements, yet witnesses often reported multiple humps simultaneously and behaviors inconsistent with known marine mammals. Optical phenomena, such as mirages over water, can deceive the eye, but the repetition and duration of sightings, sometimes over hours and across multiple observers, challenge purely perceptual interpretations. Could it be that multiple factors, natural and psychological, converged to create a phenomenon that felt real and was perceived as real by hundreds of witnesses? Or does a deeper mystery remain, hidden beneath the waves and beyond our scientific reach? The Gloucester sightings also reveal the cultural power of mystery. Newspapers and letters recount not only the creature itself, but the impact on daily life. Fishermen hesitated to venture far from shore, townspeople gathered along piers to watch, and conversations were dominated by speculation about the serpent's origins. Fear, curiosity, and wonder intertwined, demonstrating how an enigmatic sighting can shape social behavior, influence economic activity, and inspire enduring legend. Even decades later, the story of the Gloucester sea serpent continues to circulate, forming a bridge between history, folklore, and modern cryptozoology. Reflecting on the Gloucester sea serpent invites profound questions. Was this an unknown species navigating the North Atlantic, or an extraordinary confluence of natural phenomena and human perception? How many other creatures might lurk in the depths, glimpsed briefly before vanishing into obscurity? And what does the persistence of these sightings tell us about the human desire to find patterns, to confront the unknown, and to preserve the mysteries that connect us to the larger, untamed world? Like the disappearances of the Devil's Sea, the Hammersmith ghost, and the Mattoon gas panic, the Gloucester sea serpent embodies the tension between evidence and belief, observation and interpretation. The waters may appear calm today, boats drifting peacefully along the harbor, gulls wheeling overhead, yet beneath the surface, the possibility of the unknown lingers. And in that tension, between what is seen and unseen, understood and unfathomable, the thrill and chill of true mystery reside, waiting to be glimpsed, questioned, and pondered. From the rolling waves and distant mysteries of Gloucester, Massachusetts, we now turn inland, away from the ocean's vast expanse, to the dense, shadowed forests of southwestern Vermont. Here lies a region that would come to be known as the Bennington Triangle, a stretch of wilderness encompassing remote hills, rivers, and trails, where between 1945 and 1950, an unusual number of disappearances occurred, perplexing authorities, unsettling local communities, and sparking a legacy of speculation that endures to this day. Unlike the vast, open waters of the Devil's Sea, the Bennington Triangle presents a different kind of mystery, one of forested isolation, hidden paths, and the quiet, almost invisible forces that seem to claim those who wander too far. The landscape itself is striking, even to those familiar with Vermont's rugged terrain. Towering pines and maples create a dense canopy, filtering sunlight into shifting patterns on the forest floor. Rivers wind through rocky gorges, while narrow trails twist and climb, often disappearing behind hills or into thickets. Wildlife thrives here, from deer to black bears, and yet for all its beauty, there is an undeniable sense of seclusion, a quiet that can be comforting or profoundly unsettling. It was within this seemingly tranquil environment that people began to vanish, leaving behind only scattered belongings, abandoned cars, or the faintest hint of a struggle. The first well-documented disappearance occurred in 1945, when Mitty Rivers, a 74-year-old experienced hunter familiar with the forests around Glastonbury Mountain, failed to return from a hunting trip. Extensive searches turned up nothing, despite his intimate knowledge of the area. Over the next 5 years, several more individuals disappeared under similarly puzzling circumstances. Paula Weldon, a college student out for a hike; James Tedford, last seen being transported by bus; and Paul Jepson, a young boy vanished while tending to his family's farm. Common threads were sparse, yet each case shared a sense of suddenness, a disappearance so complete that it seemed to erase the presence of the individual entirely. Authorities investigated each incident thoroughly, interviewing witnesses, canvassing the region, and examining terrain that could hide a person from view. While some attributed the disappearances to natural causes, getting lost, falls, exposure, or animal attacks, others noted peculiar details that resisted easy explanation. For example, search parties sometimes found no tracks in areas known for soft soil, or only a partial trail that ended abruptly. Belongings were occasionally discovered in odd locations, suggesting movement that defied logic, as if those who vanished had stepped into another reality, or been guided off course by some unseen influence. Local residents contributed to the growing sense of unease. Many reported odd sensations while traveling the hills: sudden chills, a feeling of being watched, glimpses of strange figures among the trees. While anecdotal, these accounts reinforced the idea that the Bennington Triangle was more than a mere accident-prone stretch of wilderness. Could environmental factors, such as dense fog, treacherous terrain, or strong, unpredictable winds, have contributed to disorientation? Or did something more enigmatic, psychological, perhaps even supernatural, play a role in the vanishing of so many individuals over a concentrated period? Speculative theories abound. Some suggest that the disappearances may have involved predatory wildlife, noting the presence of wolves and bears in the area during that time. Others propose more extraordinary explanations, from unidentified aerial phenomena to unknown cryptids that could account for the sudden vanishing of people without a trace. Certain researchers point to a psychological or cultural element, observing that the intense isolation of Glastonbury Mountain, combined with its rugged terrain, could magnify fear and stress, leading to accidents or misjudgments that remain invisible to the search parties. Yet even with these explanations, a definitive pattern remains elusive, and the mystery persists, challenging conventional understanding. The Bennington Triangle also reflects the power of collective fear and narrative. Once one disappearance became public knowledge, subsequent events took on a heightened sense of terror. Newspapers reported each case with growing emphasis on the region's perilous reputation, perhaps amplifying community anxiety and shaping public perception of the wilderness. In this way, the Triangle became more than geography. It became a symbol, a locus where the ordinary rules of human navigation and survival seemed uncertain. Could these stories, magnified through word of mouth and print media, have altered both perception and reality, influencing the behavior of those who later entered the area? Eyewitness accounts from those who traversed the region provide further intrigue. Some described hearing disembodied voices or cries in otherwise empty forests, while others reported fleeting shadows or the sense of being followed. One hiker recalled a sudden drop in temperature, accompanied by a mist that seemed to curl around him, obscuring familiar landmarks. While such reports are inherently subjective, they add a human dimension to the mystery, highlighting how isolation and environmental factors can intersect with fear, expectation, and imagination. Yet these details cannot fully account for the physical disappearances themselves. Where did the missing go, and why have so few traces been left behind? The Bennington Triangle invites reflection on broader questions of human experience in extreme environments. How does isolation affect perception, judgment, and survival? To what extent do environmental hazards, psychological stress, and cultural expectation converge to create episodes that appear inexplicable? And, perhaps most compelling, could there exist aspects of wilderness life, currents of sound, light, or terrain that remain unnoticed yet exert influence in ways that defy comprehension? These questions linger, suggesting that mystery is not only a matter of unexplained phenomena, but also of our limits in understanding the world around us. Even decades later, the Bennington Triangle holds a certain, almost magnetic allure. Modern hikers and researchers occasionally traverse the area, noting the same dense forests, steep hills, and shifting trails that confounded earlier explorers. Yet the disappearances remain a chilling reminder of how a seemingly ordinary landscape can harbor extraordinary uncertainty. Like the Gloucester sea serpent that appeared fleetingly across the waves, or the Devil's Sea where ships disappeared without trace, the Bennington Triangle exists as a crossroads of human perception, environmental unpredictability, and the enduring unknown. Ultimately, the Vanishings from 1945 to 1950 challenge us to reconsider the limits of explanation. Were these losses purely the result of natural misfortune, accidents, or predation? Or do they point to a deeper, perhaps unobservable influence at work in the remote corners of our world? In contemplating the Bennington Triangle, we are reminded that even familiar landscapes may conceal mysteries, and that human understanding, while vast, remains incomplete. The forests remain, the trails wind onward, and the questions linger, inviting us to consider not just the missing, but the unfathomable forces that may still be at play in the quiet, shadowed corners of the earth. From the shadowed forests of the Bennington Triangle, where people vanished without trace, we now move to the quiet, snow-covered valleys of 19th-century New England, a region seemingly peaceful, yet one that would erupt with fear of an entirely different kind. It was the early 1800s, and towns across Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts faced not the disappearance of travelers, but a far more intimate threat: the belief that death itself could reach beyond the grave. Families were gripped by the idea that their deceased loved ones, long buried beneath frost-hardened soil, might rise to consume the life from the living. This was the era of the New England vampire panic, a phenomenon that blends disease, superstition, and a chilling reflection of human anxiety. The landscape of these communities was stark and austere. Small, timber-framed houses dotted the hills, their chimneys sending columns of smoke into crisp winter air. Cemetery stones, simple and weathered, stood at the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods where the wind whispered through skeletal trees. Families lived in close quarters, often dependent on one another for survival in harsh winters. In this environment, grief and fear could easily take root, and when tuberculosis, or consumption as it was then called, swept through a household, the line between mourning and dread blurred. Why did some members of a family sicken and die in succession? Why did certain graves seem to offer no relief, while others brought peace? Such questions gave rise to a terrifying explanation. The dead were feeding on the living. The panic began with observation and ritual. When several members of a household succumbed to consumption, townspeople would exhume the bodies of those who had died earlier. Reports from contemporaneous records describe graves disturbed, the earth dug back with care, and corpses examined for signs of vampirism. Witnesses claimed that the bodies appeared unusually preserved, with flesh that was soft or red, blood in the mouth, or other anomalies that would, to a 19th century eye, suggest the unnatural continuation of life beyond death. To prevent further deaths, families sometimes burned the heart or other parts of the corpse, believing that such acts could release the life force and protect the living. medical and cultural context provides one layer of explanation. Tuberculosis, the disease underlying most of the panic, can cause wasting, pallor, and bloodied coughs, symptoms easily interpreted as signs of the deceased draining vitality from their relatives. Preservation of soft tissue in cold, dry soil could also create the impression of an undisturbed, even animate corpse. Yet while medical reasoning explains some observations, it cannot fully account for the intensity of fear, the communal rituals, or the persistence of belief across multiple towns. How does an idea so seemingly fantastical capture the collective imagination and dictate the actions of entire families and communities? Eyewitness accounts from the time are both detailed and haunting. In one Vermont town, a farmer recounted that, after exhuming his late son, he saw the body's lips and eyes remain remarkably unchanged, and the chest appeared swollen, as if the boy had continued to breathe beyond death. In another instance, a family reported that after performing the prescribed rituals, removing the heart of the deceased and burning it, the surviving members experienced a marked improvement in health, reinforcing the belief that the dead had indeed been siphoning life. These accounts illustrate a convergence of observation, grief, and a desperate search for control in the face of disease and mortality. Folklorists and historians note that the New England vampire panic reflects broader cultural patterns. European settlers had long carried legends of the revenant, tales of the dead rising to harm the living. In New England, these beliefs intersected with the harsh realities of life and death. Limited medical knowledge, high infant and adult mortality, and the unyielding cold of winter. The result was a uniquely American expression of old fears, rooted in the tangible horrors of illness and compounded by the unknown forces imagined to accompany it. Could it be that fear itself shaped the very evidence people claimed to see, creating a feedback loop in which superstition became a self-fulfilling reality? The panic also demonstrates the human need to find causality in chaos. Death from consumption was random, cruel, and incomprehensible. By attributing fatalities to supernatural agency, communities could impose a sense of order and purpose on tragedy, however frightening. Rituals of exhumation, observation, and cremation became a form of agency, a way to intervene in forces otherwise beyond comprehension. In doing so, the line between science and superstition, observation and interpretation, became almost imperceptible. Even in hindsight, the actions of these communities evoke both horror and empathy. They are a testament to the lengths humans will go to protect one another from forces they do not understand. Speculative theories extend beyond disease and folklore. Some researchers suggest that environmental factors, such as the peculiar soil chemistry of New England graveyards or the effects of prolonged winter cold, may have preserved corpses in ways that encouraged misinterpretation. Others entertain the notion that social pressures and mass hysteria amplified ordinary observations into ritualized panic. While these theories provide plausible explanations, the visceral accounts of witnesses and the documented communal response retain an element of the unexplained. How deeply and rapidly fear can reshape the perception of reality. Even today, the sites associated with the New England vampire panic evoke unease. Cemeteries remain, weathered stones standing as silent markers of lives claimed by disease and fear. Town records, letters, and diaries preserve the stories, while historians continue to study the events as a lens into human psychology, disease response, and cultural superstition. What is striking is the universality of the fear. Across towns, across families, and across years, the panic reveals a pattern of human behavior in which mortality becomes a narrative, disease transforms into myth, and the boundaries between the living and the dead are perceived as porous and dangerous. In contemplating the New England vampire panic, we are confronted with enduring questions. To what extent were these events driven by disease, by environmental conditions, or by cultural belief? How did fear and grief shape both perception and action in ways that might seem incomprehensible today? And what does the persistence of these stories tell us about humanity's ongoing fascination with death, the unknown, and the possibility that life and influence extend beyond the grave? The events of the 1800s remind us that terror does not always require supernatural forces in the literal sense. Sometimes, it is the interplay of nature, disease, and human belief that produces the deepest chills. Just as the Bennington Triangle challenges our understanding of disappearance, and the Gloucester sea serpent defies certainty in the ocean, the New England vampire panic exposes the unsettling power of perception, tradition, and mortality. The past lingers in these valleys and cemeteries, a quiet testament to fear, to survival, and to the mysteries that remain hidden just beyond the edges of understanding. From the snow-covered valleys of New England, where fear of the living dead gripped communities in the early 1800s, we now shift our gaze westward to the heart of the Mississippi Valley. The year is 1811, and the frontier is vast, sparsely populated, and often perilous. Settlers' cabins dot the riverbanks. Farms stretch across flat floodplains, and the air carries the scent of damp earth and freshly cut timber. Yet amid this seemingly ordinary landscape, the land itself began to tremble in ways that would astound observers and leave an indelible mark on history. Between December 1811 and February 1812, the new Madrid seismic zone, spanning portions of present-day Missouri, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Kentucky, produced a series of massive earthquakes, some of the most powerful to ever shake the continental United States. While the quakes themselves were dramatic, shaking homes, toppling chimneys, and rerouting rivers, many witnesses reported an even stranger phenomenon: mysterious lights illuminating the night sky in tandem with the tremors. Settlers and Native Americans alike described glowing spheres, streaking flashes, and luminous clouds hovering over the ground and water, often coinciding with the moments of greatest seismic activity. These so-called earthquake lights added an otherworldly dimension to the already terrifying events. Descriptions from contemporary accounts vary, yet share certain striking similarities. Some reported balls of light, reddish or bluish in hue, floating above the treetops, moving erratically as if following their own intelligence. Others described columns or rays of light, projecting skyward from the horizon, bright enough to illuminate fields and rivers in the dead of night. Observers noted that the lights seemed to respond to the quakes themselves, appearing moments before tremors, flickering in sync with aftershocks, and lingering for hours after the earth had settled. For settlers already unnerved by the natural violence of earthquakes, these luminous displays seemed to hint at unseen forces at work, blending awe, fear, and profound mystery. Scientific understanding of earthquake lights was, of course, non-existent in 1811. To eyewitnesses, these lights were inexplicable, interpreted variously as divine signs, omens, or manifestations of spirits angered by human intrusion on the land. Some accounts even linked the phenomena to volcanic activity, despite the absence of nearby volcanoes, while others suggested atmospheric or electrical disturbances. Settlers wrote letters and diaries describing fear that the lights heralded worse disasters, or that they marked the presence of beings capable of controlling the earth itself. For people living on the edge of wilderness, with limited knowledge of geology or electricity, the glowing sky transformed ordinary fear into something truly uncanny. Modern research provides partial explanations, though uncertainty remains. Scientists today propose that earthquake lights may result from the release of electrical charges in rocks under intense stress. Silicate minerals, when fractured, can generate luminous plasma or ionized gases that rise through cracks and fissures, producing visible light. In the New Madrid events, the tremendous forces at play, coupled with the region's unique geology, may have created ideal conditions for such phenomena. Yet while laboratory simulations and geological studies offer plausible mechanisms, the historical reports describe behaviors that still challenge full scientific understanding. Sudden appearance and disappearance, shapes and movements that mimic intentional flight, and colors not fully replicated in experiments. Eyewitness narratives add texture and emotional weight to these phenomena. One settler recalled waking to a blood-red globe rolling along the river, illuminating the forest in a ghastly light, prompting him to flee his cabin in terror. Another described what appeared to be a column of pale fire rising to the heavens, pulsating like a living entity, as if the sky itself were alive. Native American oral histories from the time also reference unusual lights during the tremors, sometimes interpreted as spiritual warnings or the voices of spirits displaced by the shaking earth. These descriptions highlight the dual nature of the experience. It was both physical and psychological, rooted in observable phenomena, yet suffused with cultural meaning. The New Madrid earthquake lights challenge our assumptions about natural events. How can a geological process produce light visible at great distances, moving in patterns that seem deliberate? Why were these reports concentrated in specific regions, and why do some modern seismic events lack comparable visual displays? Could there be subtle, currently unknown factors at work, such as atmospheric conditions, electrical fields, or interactions between the Earth and ionosphere that we have yet to fully measure? The phenomenon straddles the boundary between natural science and mystery, reminding us that even familiar processes like earthquakes can harbor surprises that confound observation and imagination alike. The social impact of the lights was profound. Settlers already traumatized by repeated tremors interpreted the phenomenon as a portent, shaping local lore and oral traditions for generations. Stories circulated of glowing spirits rising from the ground, of divine wrath marking the frontier, and of unseen entities presiding over the trembling earth. In a region where survival depended on reading natural signs, from river levels to storm clouds, these luminous displays became embedded in the cultural memory, a chilling reminder that the natural world could express both power and enigma in ways impossible to ignore. As modern science seeks to explain earthquake lights, the historical reports from New Madrid retain an aura of uncertainty. Laboratory experiments and theoretical models approximate some aspects, yet cannot fully recreate the combination of timing, color, movement, and scale described by eyewitnesses. This tension between observation and understanding is central to the allure of the phenomenon. The lights were real enough to frighten and awe, yet inexplicable enough to provoke wonder and speculation. Reflecting on the New Madrid earthquake lights, we are reminded of humanity's fragile position in relation to nature. Earthquakes remind us of forces beyond our control, yet the lights suggest that these forces can manifest in unexpected, almost sentient ways. Were these luminous displays purely physical, a byproduct of stress in rocks and air? Or did they represent some deeper interaction between the earth, atmosphere, and human perception, a convergence of natural and mysterious elements we have yet to comprehend fully? Like the New England vampire panic, where fear reshaped perception of the living and dead, or the Bennington Triangle, where disappearance defied explanation, the New Madrid earthquake lights invite us to reconsider what we believe we understand. They illuminate not only the land, but the edges of human knowledge and the mysteries that persist when nature reveals itself in forms we cannot fully grasp. In the darkness of the Mississippi Valley, as the earth trembled and the sky glowed with unearthly fire, witnesses glimpsed the unknown, and it is that unknown, shimmering and elusive, that continues to captivate and unsettle us to this day. From the trembling plains and glowing skies of the Mississippi Valley, we now turn once more to the open seas, to a realm where isolation and the unknown meet in ways both haunting and inexplicable. It was the North Atlantic, in the cold, mist-laden waters near Greenland, where one of the most enduring maritime legends began. A story that would chill sailors and scholars alike, the tale of the ghost ship Octavius. Unlike the new Madrid earthquake lights, which flickered in response to invisible forces within the earth, the Octavius reportedly drifted silently across the ocean's surface, a vessel seemingly untouched by time, yet wholly disconnected from life. The legend, preserved in maritime lore, tells of a whaling ship, the Octavius, which set sail in the late 18th century. Its mission was routine, trading and whaling in the treacherous northern seas, but it would not reach port as expected. Decades later, in 1775, according to accounts, another ship, the Herald, reportedly encountered the Octavius trapped in Arctic ice, drifting aimlessly near Greenland. The first impression of the Herald's crew was of a ship frozen in time, perfectly preserved, yet eerily silent. No smoke rose from the chimneys. No signs of life moved along the deck. It was as if the vessel itself had become a tomb, floating across the frigid waters, carrying within it the echoes of its crew. According to the legend, when boarding the Octavius, the rescuers made a series of unnerving discoveries. The officers' cabin contained corpses at their desks, papers still arranged as if work had just ceased. In the cargo hold, the sailors were found sitting upright, frozen in position, their expressions grim and their hands gripping instruments or tools, as if the moment of death had been instantaneous. The most haunting detail, however, was the captain, seated at his desk with pen in hand, apparently mid-entry in the ship's log, which would later report the vessel's course westward toward England, a course that would have required navigating the Northwest Passage, a feat not completed by any known ship for decades after. The chilling aspect of the story lies not merely in the discovery of the dead, but in the suggestion of unnatural preservation and prolonged drift across decades of ocean. Could a vessel truly remain intact in Arctic ice, its crew frozen yet upright, while winds, currents, and storms raged around it? Modern understanding of maritime conditions, sea ice, and preservation of organic matter provides some context, but cannot fully account for the details described in the legend. Ice can preserve objects and even human remains under specific conditions, but accounts of the Octavius imply an almost deliberate stasis, a scene frozen in time, waiting to be found. Historical records are sparse, and much of the story relies on sailors' logs and anecdotal reports passed down through generations. The Octavius may have been exaggerated, or perhaps the tale merged multiple incidents of icebound ships into a single narrative. Yet the legend's persistence in maritime culture underscores its impact. Sailors feared the Arctic, not only for its storms and shifting ice, but for the possibility of encountering a ship that carried death without explanation, a floating reminder of mortality, isolation, and the ocean's mysterious power. Some researchers suggest practical explanations. Arctic drift patterns could carry wrecked vessels for decades, and extreme cold could preserve bodies for extended periods. Additionally, misinterpretation of ice formations or partially submerged hulls might have contributed to reports of ghostly ships. Optical illusions over icy waters, combined with the play of fog, light, and snow, could create appearances of life where none exists. Yet even within these rational frameworks, the story retains elements that defy complete explanation. The apparent arrangement of the crew, the detailed description of a course toward England, and the timing of discovery decades after the vessel's supposed voyage. Cultural and psychological factors also play a role. Mariners of the 18th century were steeped in superstition, well aware of the dangers of the northern seas. Ghost ships, omens, and other spectral phenomena were common in sailor lore, providing frameworks through which unexpected encounters were interpreted. In the case of the Octavius, the combination of isolation, fear, and observation of an anomalous vessel could easily reinforce the sense of encountering the supernatural. Yet, the legend's endurance suggests something deeper. It resonates with a universal fascination with what lies beyond our reach, with the boundary between life and death, motion and stasis, reality and imagination. Eyewitness narratives, though filtered through time, contribute to the enduring allure. Sailors spoke of the silent crew, of the eerie stillness that contrasted sharply with the harsh, shifting Arctic environment. They reported a sense of unease, of being watched by the dead, or of crossing paths with something that existed outside conventional experience. The story emphasizes the tension between human perception and the vast, indifferent forces of nature. Is the fear inspired by the physical realities of the ocean, the crushing cold, the unpredictability of ice, the isolation of long voyages? Or is it compounded by an almost instinctual awareness of mortality and vulnerability, heightened when surrounded by endless water and sky? Speculative theories extend even further. Could the ship have encountered unusual atmospheric conditions that slowed decomposition or altered perception? Was there a natural yet unknown process that allowed bodies to remain upright and preserved in ice? Or does the legend speak less of a physical anomaly and more of a psychological one, a manifestation of collective fear, memory, and myth-making that crystallized into a narrative still recounted centuries later? These questions persist because the legend resides at the intersection of history, geography, and the human imagination, where evidence is scarce, yet the tale is vivid enough to endure. The Octavius also invites reflection on the broader maritime psyche. Seafarers confronted constant uncertainty, sudden storms, hidden shoals, treacherous ice, and the profound isolation of open waters. In such conditions, a ghost ship becomes more than a story. It is a symbol of the unknown, a floating mirror for anxieties both practical and existential. It embodies the tension between the known and the unknowable, between human ingenuity and the vast, indifferent power of the natural world. Encountering a vessel such as the Octavius, whether literal or legendary, forced observers to confront their mortality, the unpredictability of the sea, and the limits of understanding. Even today, the tale of the Octavius retains its power to provoke curiosity and unease. Whether interpreted as folklore, exaggeration, or the vestige of a real maritime incident, it exemplifies humanity's fascination with mystery. What does it mean when a ship appears, fully manned yet unmoving, carrying a story frozen in time? Can natural phenomena truly create the impression of life where none exists? Or are there elements of the ocean yet beyond comprehension, capable of shaping perception and memory in ways science has not fully revealed? The legend does not provide answers, only questions. Questions that float endlessly, like the Octavius itself, over the cold, dark waters of history. As we reflect on the ghost ship, we are reminded that mystery often resides where isolation, danger, and human imagination converge. Just as the earthquake lights of New Madrid revealed forces we could observe but not fully explain, the Octavius challenges our understanding of life, death, and the strange, enduring ways in which the unknown manifests. In the Arctic's icy expanse, amidst drifting ice and silent waves, the ship drifts on in memory, a testament to the allure of the unexplained, the resilience of legend, and the eternal human desire to explore the borderlands of the known world. From the icy waters of the North Atlantic and the ghostly drift of the Octavius, we now return to solid ground, to the heart of Victorian London, where mystery unfolded not on the waves, but behind the closed doors of a quiet domestic residence. The year is 1876, and the city hums with the energy of industry and innovation. Gas lamps cast flickering shadows along cobblestone streets, and the scent of coal smoke and wet stone permeates the air. In the midst of this bustling metropolis, a more intimate, yet no less chilling enigma would captivate public attention and baffle investigators for decades: the strange and untimely death of Charles Bravo. The scene was an elegant townhouse at 101 Wandsworth Road in South London, where the young barrister, Charles Bravo, lived with his new wife, Florence, and their small household staff. On the evening of April 21st, 1876, Charles Bravo collapsed in his home, suffering from violent abdominal pain that would prove fatal over the following 3 days. Unlike the dramatic calamities of ships lost at sea or the vast tremors of the Mississippi Valley, this was a death confined to rooms of brick and mahogany, where appearances of normality were shattered by unseen forces. The contrast between the domestic setting and the inexplicable nature of the illness contributed to the enduring fascination with the case. Contemporary reports described Bravo as a healthy man in his late 20s, with no prior history of serious illness. Yet, over the course of several days, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Pain, vomiting, and paralysis overtook him, perplexing physicians and drawing intense scrutiny from neighbors and the press. Rumors circulated immediately, amplified by the Victorian appetite for scandal and intrigue. The household, once quiet and orderly, became a theater of suspicion, where every glance and gesture was scrutinized for clues. For the public, the question was not only how Charles Bravo had died, but by whose hand, or by what mysterious mechanism. Medical investigations revealed that Bravo had been poisoned by antimony, a toxic element commonly found in tartar emetic, a substance used medicinally at the time. But the puzzle lay in determining the source. Florence, his young and socially connected wife, was subject to speculation, yet there was little concrete evidence implicating her. Household staff, visiting friends, and even close family members all came under suspicion at various points. Despite exhaustive inquests and the public attention they attracted, no definitive conclusion was reached. The case, it seemed, straddled the line between crime, accident, and the unknown. The circumstances surrounding the poisoning remain particularly strange. Bravo had been careful in his personal habits, often preparing his own meals and drinks, yet somehow ingested lethal doses of antimony. Did he consume it accidentally, perhaps mistaking a medicinal preparation for something else? Or was it administered intentionally, a silent act of malice in a household accustomed to strict routines? Reports describe moments when Bravo questioned those around him, only to receive cryptic or evasive responses, heightening the sense of psychological tension that pervaded the home. Was this a domestic conspiracy, a tragic accident, or the manifestation of forces that could never be fully explained? Speculative theories proliferated immediately, fueled by the press and Victorian fascination with domestic horror. Some suggested that Florence, frustrated by her husband's temperament and the constraints of society, might have had motives for murder, a notion that reflected broader anxieties about women, morality, and power in Victorian England. Others proposed accidental contamination, perhaps through a medicinal tonic misapplied or improperly stored. There were even more fantastical theories, invoking curses, poisonings linked to political intrigue, or strange coincidences, none of which could be substantiated. In each interpretation, the case highlights the tension between observable fact and human conjecture. What is seen, what is assumed, and what may forever remain unknowable. Eyewitness accounts and contemporary letters lend texture to the mystery. The household staff described Bravo's final days with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. His sudden weakness, pallor, and mounting pain contrasted sharply with moments of apparent lucidity. Friends and neighbors recalled seeing him in the garden, holding himself against the chill evening air, yet no one could fathom the cause of his suffering. Inquests were held, testimonies collected, and medical expertise applied, yet the antimony's precise path remained elusive. This combination of visible evidence and unresolved questions is central to the story's enduring power. Modern researchers and forensic historians have revisited the case, applying contemporary knowledge to the details recorded in the 19th century accounts. Chemical analysis of antimony toxicity, patterns of absorption, and potential accidental exposure have been explored, yet none provide a definitive answer. Was Charles Bravo's death a calculated act of poison, the result of an unintended error, or a combination of both? Could Victorian social dynamics, the fear of scandal, rigid hierarchies within households, and the emphasis on public reputation have obscured what may have been an accidental death? The ambiguity persists, precisely because multiple plausible explanations coexist alongside documented facts. The psychological dimensions of the case are equally compelling. In the home, behind the heavy curtains and gas-lit rooms, the unknown exerted a palpable influence. Did the fear and suspicion amplify perceptions of events, creating a narrative that transcended the physical reality of poison? In Victorian culture, the domestic sphere was both sanctuary and site of potential peril, a space where appearances could be deceptive and unseen forces, whether social, chemical, or supernatural, could assert themselves. Bravo's death, set against this backdrop, occupies a space where medical mystery and human psychology intersect, where what is observed can never fully reconcile with what is understood. The enduring fascination with the death of Charles Bravo lies in its perfect balance of clarity and ambiguity. We know the toxin, the symptoms, and the timeline, yet the method, motive, and perpetrator remain shrouded in uncertainty. This tension mirrors the broader human experience of mystery itself. Even with observation and analysis, some events resist full explanation. In a quiet London townhouse over a century ago, life ended abruptly, leaving questions that echo into the present. How could such a calculated act, or accident, occur within the structured, seemingly ordinary world of Victorian domesticity? And why do the details continue to provoke curiosity, speculation, and a sense of unease? Like the ghostly drift of the Octavius, the New Madrid earthquake lights, or the New England vampire panic, the strange death of Charles Bravo invites reflection on the limits of human knowledge. It is a case where the mundane, the home, the meal, the familiar routine, intersects with the extraordinary, where ordinary materials like antimony transform into agents of mystery, and where the silence of the observer becomes as significant as the evidence itself. Bravo's final days, meticulously recorded yet fundamentally unresolved, linger in memory not only as a historical anomaly, but as a reminder of how easily life can intersect with the inexplicable. As we contemplate the events of April 1876, questions remain. Was this death a carefully orchestrated act, a tragic accident, or something that can never be fully known? Does the story reflect more about the mysteries of Victorian society, or about the enduring human fascination with unexplained events? And, perhaps most hauntingly, can we ever reconcile the quiet domestic setting with the violence and uncertainty that unfolded within it? The death of Charles Bravo, like the ghost ships and spectral lights that preceded it, reminds us that even in places of familiarity, the unknown can assert itself, leaving a legacy that continues to intrigue, unsettle, and challenge our understanding of the world.